The room is quiet. The world outside has finally fallen silent, but inside your mind, a storm is raging. The stillness of the night only amplifies the noise within as your thoughts race, replaying words spoken in anger, re-examining moments of regret, and rehearsing anxieties for a tomorrow that has not yet arrived. You long for silence, not the absence of sound, but the quieting of this internal tempest. There is a weight on your chest, a tightness in your breath, and a profound sense of exhaustion. You might look at an empty cup on your bedside table and see a reflection of your own spirit, drained and depleted by the invisible burdens you carry. If this experience feels familiar to you, know that you are not alone. This is the quiet suffering of our modern age, a condition born from a world that never sleeps. We are relentlessly assaulted by information, by the pressure to perform, to achieve, to acquire. We are taught to measure our worth by external things, by our successes and possessions, which leaves us in a constant state of feeling that we are not enough, that we do not have enough. We find ourselves caught in a painful limbo, anchored to a past we cannot change, and pulled by an anxiety for a future we cannot control. Pain and its close companion, anxiety, have become our unwanted shadows, following us into the lonely hours of the night. But what if there was another way? What if the key to peace was not found in adding more to our lives, but in gently letting go? What if the solution was not to build stronger walls to keep pain out, but to learn how to open the door and sit with it, understanding it, until it loses its power over us? Thousands of years ago, a human being wrestled with these same fundamental questions of suffering, of restlessness, of the deep and pervasive feeling of dissatisfaction that haunts our existence. He was not a god, but a man who embarked on a profound journey into the nature of his own mind, and he found a way out. He became known as the Buddha, which simply means the one who is awake. The path he discovered and shared is not a religion that demands blind faith, but rather a practical science of the mind, a timeless art of living that offers tools for anyone, of any background, who seeks to find peace amidst the chaos. It is an invitation to turn our gaze inward, to become gentle explorers of our own inner landscape. It is a path that teaches us how to untie the knots of our own suffering, one by one. This journey we are about to embark on together is an exploration of that path, a gentle immersion into the wisdom of Buddhism as a practical guide to finding the peace, the rest, and the inner freedom that you so deeply deserve. Our first instinct, when faced with pain, is to turn away. It is a deeply ingrained, primal response. A hand flinches from a hot surface. Our eyes squeeze shut at the sight of something deeply unsettling. In the same way, our mind, our heart, recoils from emotional and psychological pain. We believe, instinctively, that our safety lies in avoidance, that if we can just ignore the feeling, distract ourselves from it, or push it down deep enough, it will cease to exist. But the path to inner peace, the journey to true healing, begins with a step in the opposite direction. It does not begin with running away. It begins with the simple, yet immensely courageous, act of turning around to look. It begins with the courage to see. The Buddha, in his profound understanding of the human mind, once spoke of 2 arrows. This teaching is perhaps the most important foundation for understanding our relationship with pain. He said that in life, we cannot always avoid being struck by a first arrow. This first arrow represents the direct, unavoidable pains of existence. It is the headache that throbs in your temple. It is the grief that comes with the loss of someone you cherish. It is the sting of a critical word from a friend or a boss. It is the disappointment of a plan that fails, the frustration of a traffic jam, the physical pain of an injury or illness. No one on this earth, no matter how wise, how wealthy, or how virtuous, is immune to these first arrows. They are a fundamental condition of living a human life. They will come. The real problem, the source of so much of our deepest suffering, the Buddha explained, lies with the second arrow. The second arrow is the one we shoot into ourselves, immediately after being struck by the first. It is the arrow of our reaction. It is the story we weave around the raw fact of the first arrow. For instance, the first arrow is a headache. The second arrow is the thought, why me? This is going to ruin my entire day. I can never catch a break. I won't be able to concentrate on my work, and everything will fall apart. The first arrow is a criticism from another person. The second arrow is the internal monologue of, I am worthless. They must be right. I am a failure. Everyone secretly thinks I'm incompetent. I will never be respected. This second arrow is made of potent materials. It is forged from judgment, resistance, fear, anger, resentment, and self-pity. The first arrow causes pain. The second arrow creates suffering. Pain is a clean, direct experience. Suffering is the tangled, sticky, and prolonged anguish created by our mind's refusal to accept the pain. The Buddha's teaching is radical in its simplicity. We cannot always control whether the first arrow is fired, but the second arrow is entirely our own doing. The suffering it creates is optional. Therefore, our entire practice of finding peace begins right here, in this crucial space between the first and second arrows. It begins with learning how to feel the sting of the first, without reaching into our quiver for the second. To do this, we must first be honest with ourselves about all the ways we have been avoiding the first arrow. In our modern world, we have become masters of avoidance, building intricate and elaborate castles of distraction to protect us from feeling our own discomfort. The most common fortress is the digital world. The moment an uncomfortable feeling like loneliness, boredom, or sadness arises, we reach for our phones. We plunge into the endless scroll of social media, the stream of news headlines, the captivating drama of a television series. We use the light of the screen to blind ourselves to our inner darkness, using it as a digital anesthetic for the heart. Another powerful form of avoidance is busyness. We fill every moment of our calendars with work, chores, social engagements, and obligations. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor because a packed schedule leaves no empty space for our true feelings to surface. If we are always moving, always doing, always producing, then perhaps we will not have to feel the quiet ache of emptiness or the sharp pang of regret. We treat our lives like a frantic race, hoping we can outrun the shadows that follow us. And of course, there are more overt forms of numbing. We may use food, alcohol, or other substances not for nourishment or true enjoyment, but as a way to dull the edges of our pain, to create a temporary, foggy haze where our troubles seem distant and muffled. Even on a more subtle level, we can use intellectualization as a shield. We analyze our pain, we read books about it, we talk about it with therapists, we construct elaborate theories about why we are the way we are. We do everything we can about the pain, except for the one thing that will actually help us heal: the simple act of feeling it, directly and without commentary. But pain that is ignored does not simply vanish. Pain that is unfelt does not disappear. It goes underground. Imagine trying to hold a large beach ball under the surface of the water. It takes an immense and constant pressure to keep it down. You can do it for a while, but your arms grow tired, your focus wavers, and the moment you lose concentration, the ball erupts from the surface, with a force far greater than it would have had if you just let it float in the first place. This is what happens to our suppressed emotions. They manifest in other ways, as a chronic tension in our shoulders and neck, as unexplained anxiety that hums just beneath the surface of our days, as a short temper that flares up at the smallest provocation, or as a pervasive, low-grade depression that colors everything in shades of gray. The energy we spend avoiding our pain is far greater than the energy it would take to simply feel it. So, how do we begin this courageous act of seeing? We start smaller than you can possibly imagine. We do not begin by trying to solve the pain, or fix it, or even understand it. We begin, simply, by acknowledging its presence. In the practice of mindfulness, this is called recognition. It is the simple act of naming what is here. When a difficult feeling arises, instead of immediately distracting yourself or building a story around it, you pause, you take a breath, and you apply a gentle, silent label to the experience in your mind. You might say, "Ah, this is sadness," or "I see you, anger. This is what fear feels like in my body. Here is the presence of loneliness." This gentle act of naming is incredibly powerful for two reasons. First, it immediately creates a small space between you and the emotion. When you say, "There is sadness," you are implicitly recognizing that you are not the sadness. You are the one who is aware of the sadness. You are the vast open sky, and the emotion is simply a cloud passing through. You are no longer completely identified with it, consumed by it. A space of consciousness has opened up. Second, this neutral labeling removes the second arrow of judgment. Notice the phrasing. It isn't, "This is a bad feeling," or "I shouldn't be feeling this way," or "Why is this anger still here?" It is simply, "This is what is." It is a statement of fact, offered with the same gentle neutrality as if you were noticing, "The sky is blue," or "The sound of a bird is here." This in itself is a profound act of self-compassion. You are finally giving yourself permission to feel what you are actually feeling. After you have named the feeling, the next step is even more radical. You do nothing. You simply allow the feeling to be there. Imagine the emotion is a visitor who has knocked on your door. For your whole life, you have been either barricading the door, pretending you're not home, or yelling through the door for it to go away. The practice now is to gently open the door and allow the visitor to come in and sit in the room of your awareness for a moment. You don't have to serve it tea. You don't have to agree with it or entertain it. You simply allow it to be. You observe it with a gentle curiosity. Where is this feeling in my body? Is it a tightness in the throat? A burning sensation in the chest? A hollow feeling in the pit of the stomach? Does it have a temperature? A texture? A vibration? Does it stay the same, or does it shift and change? You are not analyzing it to get rid of it. You are simply getting to know it, as you would a stranger. A truly miraculous thing happens when we stop fighting with our pain and instead meet it with this kind of calm, steady attention. It begins to soften. The energy that was fueling it, which was our resistances, no longer being supplied. The feeling, having been seen, named, and allowed, like a crying child who has finally been picked up and held, often begins to settle. It may not disappear instantly, but its sharp, demanding grip on us begins to loosen. It can finally begin to flow through us, and, eventually, out of us. This is the courage to see. It is not about being fearless, but about being present with your fear. It is not about being an invincible warrior who feels no pain, but about finding a profound strength in your own vulnerability. It is the first, most essential step. It is the practice of stopping the second arrow. It begins with one conscious breath. It begins with the simple, kind, and courageous willingness to stop running, to turn around, and to look with compassion at whatever is truly here. Now that we have gathered the courage to look at our pain, we must ask a deeper question. What is this pain, truly? Where does it come from? And what is its fundamental nature? To understand this, we must explore the first great truth. The Buddha taught the universal reality of what he called Dukkha. In the last step of our journey, we found the courage to turn and face our pain. Now, we must look more deeply to understand its fundamental nature. The Buddha, in his first and most foundational teaching, presented a truth about the human condition. He used a single word to describe it: Dukkha. This Pali word is most often translated as suffering, and because of this, many who first encounter these teachings assume that Buddhism is a pessimistic or negative philosophy, one that denies the existence of joy and focuses only on the hardships of life. But this is a profound misunderstanding. To translate dukkha merely as suffering is like describing the vast and complex ocean as being merely wet. The word points to something much deeper, more subtle, and ultimately more liberating. A better way to understand dukkha is to see it as a diagnosis given by a master physician of the mind. Imagine you have been feeling unwell for a long time, with a collection of strange and unsettling symptoms. You go to a doctor who, after a careful examination, looks at you with compassion and says, "I understand what this is. I have a name for it." In that moment, you don't feel despair. You feel a profound sense of relief. The vagueness is gone. The self-blame, the feeling that you were imagining it, or that it was somehow your fault, begins to dissolve. A diagnosis is not a curse. It is the first, essential step toward a cure. When the Buddha spoke of the truth of dukkha, he was not saying that life is nothing but misery. He was making the most compassionate statement possible. I see your dis-ease. I understand its nature. It is a universal condition, and because we can understand it, there is a way to heal it. Dukkha refers to the entire spectrum of dissatisfaction that runs through our lives. It ranges from the most acute physical and emotional agony to the most subtle, background hum of anxiety that tells us something is just not quite right. It is the inherent unsteadiness of a wheel that is slightly off its axle, producing a constant, subtle wobble on even the smoothest of roads. To fully grasp this, we must look to the story of the Buddha himself. Before he was the Buddha, the awakened one, he was a prince named Siddhartha Gautama. His father, a king, determined to shield his son from all suffering, built for him a palace of pure pleasure. Every desire was met before it could fully form. Young, beautiful attendants surrounded him. The gardens were always in bloom. The music was always sweet. The words old age, sickness, and death were forbidden. It was a perfect, gilded cage, an artificial bubble designed to protect him from the raw realities of the human condition. But a deep spiritual intelligence cannot be caged forever. Siddhartha grew restless and insisted on seeing the world beyond the palace walls. Reluctantly, his father agreed, but arranged for the streets to be cleared of any unpleasant sights. Yet, the forces of reality could not be so easily managed. On his first trip, Siddhartha saw something he had never seen before. A man bent over with age, his skin wrinkled, his body frail, struggling to stand upright. Shocked, the prince asked his charioteer, "What is that?" The charioteer, unable to lie, replied, "That is an old man. That is what happens to all of us, prince, if we live long enough." For the first time, Siddhartha understood that his own youth and vitality were not permanent. The first crack had appeared in his bubble of perfection. On a second trip, he saw a person lying by the roadside, their body covered in sores, moaning in pain. Again, he asked, "What is that?" And again the stark truth came. That is a sick person. Sickness can strike any of us, at any time, without warning. Siddhartha realized that his own perfect health was just as fragile. The crack widened. On a third journey, he encountered a funeral procession. He saw a still, lifeless body being carried by weeping relatives. This sight struck him to the core. "What is that?" he asked, his voice trembling. The charioteer replied, "That is death. It is the inevitable end for every being that is born. No one is exempt." In that moment, the entire artifice of his life collapsed. He saw that his own life, his loved ones, all the pleasures he enjoyed, were subject to this same inexorable law. His bubble had shattered, but there was a fourth sight. He saw a renunciant, a holy man walking with a shaved head and a simple robe. What struck the prince was not his poverty, but his face. It radiated a profound calm, a deep and unshakable peace. Here was a man who was clearly exposed to all the sufferings of the world, yet was not crushed by them. In his eyes, Siddhartha saw not despair, but freedom. He asked, "Who is this?" and was told, "This is one who has gone forth from the world to find a way out of suffering." And in that moment, Siddhartha's own quest was born. This story is a parable for our own lives. We all live in self-constructed palaces, trying to insulate ourselves with pleasure, with distraction, with denial. But life inevitably shows us the realities of dukkha. To understand it more deeply, the Buddha described it in three distinct categories. The first is dukkha, the suffering of suffering. This is the most obvious form, the one Siddhartha saw on his journeys. It is the direct pain of the first arrow. It is the pain of a migraine, of a broken bone, of a chronic illness. It is the emotional anguish of grief when a loved one dies, the sting of betrayal, the terror of a panic attack, the despair of depression. It is all the overt, undeniable pain that makes us say, "I am suffering." Everyone recognizes this form of dukkha. The second category is more subtle. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. This is the dukkha that arises from the fact that our pleasant experiences are impermanent. Think of a moment of pure joy, a beautiful sunset, a loving embrace, the taste of a perfect meal, the peak of a long-awaited vacation. The experience is wonderful, but often, woven into the fabric of that joy, is a subtle thread of anxiety. A quiet voice whispers, "This won't last." The pleasure of the meal ends. The vacation comes to a close. The embrace must eventually be released. Our happiness, when it is dependent on external conditions, is inherently fragile. We suffer not because these experiences are bad, but precisely because they are good, and we know they cannot last forever. We try to grasp them, to hold on to them, but they are like sand slipping through our fingers. This creates a subtle, persistent dissatisfaction, the suffering born from the inevitable change of all things. The third and most profound category is sankhara dukkha, the suffering of conditioned existence. This is the baseline dukkha, the background hum of unsatisfactoriness that is woven into the very fabric of our lives as conditioned beings. It is the low-level anxiety that comes from being a temporary self, a composite of a body that is aging, emotions that are fluctuating, and thoughts that are unreliable. It is the inherent insecurity of trying to build a solid, permanent sense of me in a world where everything is in flux. It is that vague feeling of, is this all there is? that can arise even when things are going well. It is the stress of constantly maintaining our identity, defending our ego, and striving to secure ourselves in a fundamentally insecure world. This is the subtle wobble of the off-center wheel, the dis-ease that is present, even in the absence of overt pain or the loss of pleasure. To hear this full diagnosis might seem overwhelming, but its intention is the absolute opposite of to create despair. It is a moment of profound liberation. First, it validates our deepest experiences. It tells you that the subtle feelings of anxiety, loneliness, and dissatisfaction you feel are not a sign that you are broken or that you are doing life wrong. It is a shared, universal condition. There is an immense relief in knowing it's not just me. Second, this clear diagnosis is what makes a cure possible. It reorients our search for happiness. It shows us, with piercing clarity, why our frantic quest to find lasting peace in temporary things, in possessions, status, relationships, or fleeting sensory pleasuresis, ultimately doomed to fail. It's like trying to build a house on a frozen lake. It might seem solid for a while, but eventually the ice will melt. This understanding encourages us to stop searching for security where none can be found, and instead to turn inward to look for a different kind of peace that is not dependent on the ever-changing conditions of the outside world. The Buddha did not stop with the diagnosis of dukkha. That was merely the first noble truth. Having identified the nature of our fundamental unease, he then pointed directly to its causes, and most importantly, to the path that leads to its end. And if the suffering of change and the suffering of conditioned existence are so deeply rooted in the fact that everything is fragile and in flux, then our next step must be to look directly, without fear, into the very nature of change itself. This brings us to the next great pillar of insight, the profound truth of impermanence. We have seen that a deep source of our dissatisfaction, our dukkha, comes from the fact that our happy moments are fragile and that life itself is fundamentally unstable. We experience a joy, and our immediate impulse is to make it permanent. We experience a loss, and we feel that the resulting sadness will last forever. In both cases, we are struggling against a current far more powerful than ourselves. The Buddha gave this current a name, anicca. It means impermanence. It is the universal law that everything that arises must, in time, pass away. Imagine standing on the bank of a great, flowing river. The water rushes past, shimmering and changing with every moment. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus said that you can never step into the same river twice. The Buddha's insight goes even deeper. Not only is the river constantly changing, but you, the one standing on the bank, are also in a state of constant flux. The cells in your body are changing, your thoughts are flowing, your feelings are shifting. Therefore, it is not the same river, and you are not the same person. Anicca is this universal, unceasing flow. It is the rhythm of the cosmos, from the birth and death of distant stars to the life and death of a single thought. The river flows, yet we spend our lives on the bank, trying to build dams. We try to grasp the water in our fists, only to find our hands empty. All of our suffering arises from this fundamental conflict, the unyielding reality of flow versus our desperate desire for permanence. The most intimate and undeniable place to witness anicca is within your own body. You don't need to look for it in books or philosophies. It is as close as your next breath. Right now, if you wish, simply bring your awareness to the process of breathing without trying to change it. Just observe it. Notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils. It has a beginning. It fills your lungs for a time, and then it has an end. Then there is a brief pause, an empty space, before the outbreath begins. The outbreath, too, arises, exists for a moment, and then dissolves. Each breath is a perfect, miniature lesson in impermanence. It is a cycle of arising and passing, over and over again. You do not have to cling to the in-breath or push away the out-breath. Your body knows how to let go. Extend this awareness to your body as a whole. We tend to think of our body as a solid, static object, a thing we own. But it is not a thing. It is a process. It is a bustling metropolis of change. Billions of cells are dying and being reborn in this very moment. The food you ate for lunch is being transformed into energy. The skin you have today is not the skin you had a month ago. On a cellular level, the person you were 7 years ago is almost entirely gone, replaced by new matter. We see this most clearly in the process of aging. We often fear aging as a decline, but from the perspective of Anicca, it is simply a clear and honest demonstration of a law that has been in effect since the moment you were born. The face that looks back at you from the mirror is not the same face as yesterday. To see this without fear, but with a quiet acceptance, is to begin to align yourself with reality. Even more fluid and fast-moving than the body is the inner landscape of your mind. Think of a powerful emotion you felt recent, perhaps a wave of pure joy from good news, or a surge of hot anger from an argument. Where is that emotion now? It may have left a trace, a memory, but the raw energy of the feeling itself has passed. Emotions are like the weather. A storm of anger can roll in, with dark clouds and thunder, but no storm lasts forever. Eventually, it passes, and the sky clears. The sun of happiness can shine brightly, warming everything, but it, too, will eventually be covered by other clouds. They come, they go. The problem is that we don't treat them like weather. When the sun of happiness is shining, we cling to it desperately. We think, this is it. This is how I should always feel. And we live in fear of it ending, which, as we saw, is the suffering of change. When the storm of sadness or fear rolls in, we resist it with all our might. We think, this is terrible. I have to get rid of this feeling, and we fear it will never leave. We suffer because we try to make the temporary permanent. The practice of wisdom is to learn to hold both with a lighter touch, to greet both the sun and the storm with the same recognition. I see you. I know you are a visitor. I know you will not last. And what of our thoughts? They are even more fleeting and ephemeral. Observe your mind for just a few moments. Thoughts appear as if from nowhere, linger for a second or two, and then vanish, replaced by the next. They are like bubbles rising to the surface of a pond, or clouds drifting across the sky. Yet we invest so much of our identity and belief in these fleeting mental events. We take a passing thought of self-doubt and mistake it for an unchangeable truth about our worth. We take a passing thought of judgment towards another and mistake it for a clear and accurate assessment. We are like a person sitting by a train station, jumping onto every single train of thought that pulls in and letting it carry us away to destinations of anxiety and regret. The practice of seeing Anicca in the mind is to learn to sit on the platform, to watch the trains of thought come and go, without feeling compelled to board every single one. There is a famous Buddhist story that illustrates this truth with heartbreaking beauty. It is the story of a young mother named Kisa Gotami. Her first and only child, just a toddler, had fallen ill and died. Consumed by an unbearable grief, she refused to accept his death. She wandered through her village, clutching the small, lifeless body to her chest, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring her son back. People looked at her with pity, thinking she had lost her mind in her sorrow. Finally, a kind person suggested she visit the Buddha. She went to him, laid her son at his feet, and made her desperate plea. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion. He did not dismiss her or tell her that her wish was impossible. Instead, he said, "I can make the medicine you seek, but to do so, I need one special ingredient. You must go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed. However," he added, "the mustard seed must come from a house where no Wanano child, no spouse, no parent, no Savanthus ever died." Filled with a surge of hope, Kisa Gotami rushed back to the village. She knocked on the first door. "The Buddha has sent me for a mustard seed to make a medicine for my son. Can you spare one?" The woman of the house replied, "Of course, we have plenty." But as she was about to give it, Kisa Gotami remembered the condition. "Has anyone in this house ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, my dear," she said, "the living are few, but the dead are many. We lost our beloved father just last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. "You are welcome to the mustard seeds, but our youngest daughter died. Please, take what you need, but we are still mourning my husband." House after house, she found kindness and mustard seeds, but she could not find a single home untouched by death. As dusk fell, she sat by the roadside, watching the flickering oil lamps in the village homes, lighting up one by one, only to eventually burn out. In that quiet moment, a profound realization dawned. She had believed that her suffering was uniquely hers, a singular tragedy. Now, she saw with absolute clarity that loss, death, and impermanence were not her personal curse. They were the shared, universal law of all existence. Her personal grief dissolved into a universal compassion. She understood. She gently wrapped her child's body, carried him to the charnel ground, and returned to the Buddha, no longer seeking a magic cure, but with the deep, quiet wisdom of Anicca in her heart. To hear this, one might think the lesson is to become cold and detached, to not love anyone or anything for fear of losing them. But this is a misunderstanding. The wisdom of impermanence does not lead to apathy. It leads to a profound and vibrant appreciation. It is precisely because this moment is fleeting that it is so infinitely precious. You do not lament a cherry blossom because you know its beauty will only last for a week. That brief, stunning existence is what makes it so poignant and so worthy of your full attention. We cherish it because we know it is temporary. The same is true for all of life. To love another person is not to possess them, but to cherish their presence in this moment, knowing that this moment is the only one we ever truly have. To engage in our work, our art, our lives, is to give ourselves completely to the task at hand, appreciating the process without being desperately attached to a permanent outcome. It is a fundamental shift from clinging to cherishing. Anicca, impermanence, is the rhythm of the universe. It is not a flaw in the system, it is the system itself. Our practice is to learn how to dance with this flow, instead of constantly trying to swim against it. We learn to let go, not with resignation, but with grace. We have now seen that our bodies are in constant flux, and our minds are a river of changing thoughts and feelings. This leads us to a most profound and challenging question. If everything we identify with is impermanent, then who is the one who is doing the experiencing? If everything is changing, what is this self, this I, that we work so tirelessly to protect, promote, and defend? To answer this, we must now venture into one of the most liberating and radical insights of the Buddha, the truth of no self. We have walked the path of impermanence, anicca, and seen that everything we can experience is in a state of constant, ceaseless flow. Our bodies are not solid, but are rivers of change. Our feelings and thoughts arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. This realization, while profound, naturally leads us to the most radical and challenging question in our entire inner journey. If everything is changing, who or what is the I that is observing this change? If my thoughts are not me, my feelings are not me, and my body is not me, then who am I? The Buddha's answer to this question is perhaps his most unique and liberating teaching. It is the teaching of anatta, or no self. Hearing this term for the first time can be unsettling, even frightening. The idea of no self might sound like a cold, nihilistic statement that we do not exist, that our lives are meaningless, that we are nothing. But this is the greatest misunderstanding of all. The teaching of anatta is not a philosophy of annihilation. It is the ultimate philosophy of liberation. It is not meant to take anything away from you, but rather to unburden you from a case of mistaken identity that you have been carrying your entire life. Imagine you have been carrying a heavy, marble statue on your back since birth. You have strained under its weight, you have polished it, defended it, and worried constantly that it might be scratched or broken, because you have always believed that this statue is you. The teaching of anatta is a gentle invitation to set the statue down for a moment, to look at it closely, and to realize, with a sigh of immense relief, that it was never you in the first place. The goal is not to smash the statue, but to finally be free from its crushing weight. To understand this, we can turn to a famous conversation that took place between a Buddhist sage named Nagasena and a Greek king, Melinda, who was a brilliant and skeptical intellectual. The king, wishing to test the sage's wisdom, asked him, "Venerable sir, what is your name?" Nagasena replied, "I am known as Nagasena, your majesty, but this is only a designation, a convenient term. There is no permanent person, no unchanging soul to be found here." The king was incredulous. "If there is no person," he challenged, "then who is it that wears these robes? Who eats, sleeps, and studies the teachings?" It is a nonsense to say Nagasena exists, but the person does not. He then pointed to his royal chariot, parked nearby. "Venerable sir, is this chariot the long pole that connects to the horses?" "No, your majesty," said Nagasena. "Then, is it the axle? Number? Is it the wheels, the frame, the reins, or the whip?" To each question, Nagasena replied, "Number." Then, the king pressed, "Is the chariot all of these parts put together?" "No, your majesty." "Then, is the chariot something separate and apart from all these components?" "No," the sage replied calmly. The king, triumphant, declared, "Then, sir, you speak a falsehood. The word chariot is empty. There is no chariot." It was then that Nagasena gently turned the king's own logic back upon him. "Your majesty, you say you arrived in a chariot, but as we have seen, the word chariot is simply a convenient name, a concept we use to refer to the way these parts are assembled and function together. The chariot has no independent, inherent existence of its own. It is a convention, a useful designation." He then looked at the king with a kind smile. In exactly the same way, Nagasena is just a convenient name for a temporary collection of components. When we investigate this collection, we find no permanent, unchanging self who is the owner or controller. There is only the process itself, So, what are these components that we mistake for a self? The Buddha's analysis breaks down our experience into 5 categories, known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. Let us look at the statue on our back, piece by piece. The first aggregate is form. This is the physical component, our body, with its flesh, bones, and blood, as well as the entire material world we perceive through our senses. We have already seen in our exploration of anicca that this body is a river of change, not a solid entity. If you lose a limb in an accident, are you any less you? Of course not. So clearly, you are not your body. The second aggregate is feelings, or sensations. This refers to the raw data that arises whenever our senses make contact with the world. These are categorized as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A cool breeze on a hot day is a pleasant feeling. Stubbing your toe is an unpleasant feeling. The sensation of your clothes against your skin might be neutral. Are you these feelings? Think how quickly they change. One moment, there is pleasure. The next, pain. The next, nothing in particular. If you were your feelings, yourself would be born and die thousands of times a day. You are the one who experiences feelings, but you are not the feelings themselves. The third aggregate is perception. This is the mind's faculty for recognizing and labeling. It's the process that says, that is a tree, that is the sound of a bell, that was an insult, this is a compliment. Are you your perceptions? Your perceptions are conditioned by your culture, your upbringing, and your past experiences. What one person perceives as a beautiful piece of modern art, another perceives as a meaningless mess. Your perception is not an objective truth. It is a conditioned interpretation. You are not these fleeting, conditioned labels. The fourth aggregate is the most complex. It is called mental formations or volitions. This includes all of our habits, biases, opinions, beliefs, moods, intentions, desires, and aversions. It is what we commonly think of as our character or personality. This is the part we most strongly identify with. I am an anxious person. I am a Republican. I have a good sense of humor. But are these formations a solid, permanent self? Think of the opinions you held as a teenager. Are they the same today? Your habits can be changed with diligent effort. Your moods shift like the tides. These are not a solid core. They are learned patterns of mental energy, conditioned responses that can be reconditioned. They are not who you are. They are what you currently do. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. This is the most subtle. This is not a soul or a spirit, but the raw faculty of knowing, the basic awareness that arises when a sense organ meets its object. For instance, eye consciousness arises only when a functioning eye and a visible form come together. Ear consciousness arises only when an ear and a sound come together. It does not exist independently. It is not a continuous, monolithic entity like a light bulb that is always on. It is more like the spark that flashes when two stones are struck together. It is a flickering, dependent process, not a permanent, independent knower. So, if we investigate ourselves honestly, we find we are not our body, not our feelings, not our perceptions, not our mental habits, and not our flickering consciousness. This can feel like we are left with nothing, but the question, then who am I, is the wrong question. It assumes the answer is a thing, a noun. The teaching of anatta suggests we are not a thing at all. We are a process. We are a verb. The truth is not that you are nothing, but that you are no thing. You are the awareness itself, the open, clear, sky-like space in which all these phenomena, clouds of thought, the storms of emotion, the changing weather of the body arise, manifest for a time, and pass away. The liberation in this is immense. When you stop identifying with the statue, its weight disappears. When someone criticizes you, it is no longer a mortal wound to the core of your being. It is simply an unpleasant sound, an unpleasant feeling, and a thought of judgment, all arising and passing in the space of awareness. The frantic, lifelong project of defending and promoting the ego begins to relax. Pride in my accomplishments and shame for my failures both diminish, because you see they are just events in a process. The compulsion to compare yourself to others weakens, because you see that we are all just changing processes, not fixed entities on a scoreboard. Even the deep fear of death begins to lose its sting, for you realize the solid, separate self that you feared would be annihilated was an illusion to begin with. There is only the changing, flowing river of life. The goal is not to smash the chariot, but to be a wise driver who uses it skillfully, maintaining it and guiding it, without ever being deluded into thinking that you are the chariot. This insight into no self is profoundly freeing. And yet, even after seeing this truth, we find ourselves acting as if we have a self to protect. We still grasp at pleasure. We still push away pain. We still want and desire and cling. Why? What is the powerful engine that drives this whole process of self-creation and perpetuates our suffering, even against our better judgment? To understand this, we must now examine the very root of the problem, the potent, instinctual, and relentless energy of craving. We have walked through the territory of our own disquiet. We have looked unflinchingly at the landscape of stress, anxiety, and a deep, persistent feeling that something is not quite right. This state, the Buddha called Dukkha. We then journey deeper to the very source of this discontent, uncovering the relentless thirst of craving, tanha, and its shadowy twin, aversion, all born from a fundamental misunderstanding of reality, a veil of ignorance. To linger here, in this diagnosis of the human condition, could feel heavy, even disheartening. It could be mistaken for a philosophy of pessimism, a final word on the inevitability of struggle. But this is precisely where the path turns, where the diagnosis gives way to the prognosis, and the prognosis is one of profound, radical hope. This turning point is the third noble truth, the truth of Nirodha, the cessation of suffering. It is the declaration that there is an end to the fever. There is a way out of the storm. Nirodha is a Pali word that translates to cessation, ending, or confinement. It does not mean annihilation. It is not a bleak void or a state of nothingness. This is perhaps the most critical misunderstanding to clear away. The mind, accustomed to thinking in terms of being and non-being, struggles with a concept that transcends both. The cessation spoken of here is not the cessation of you, but the cessation of the suffering you experience. It is the end of the turmoil, the extinguishing of the fires that cause so much pain. The Buddha used a powerful, simple metaphor, the image of a fire going out. When a fire runs out of fuel, where does the flame go? It doesn't travel north or south, east or west. It doesn't go into storage. It simply ceases to be, because the conditions that sustained it, the fuel and the heat, are no longer present. So it is with suffering. Suffering is a fire, and its fuel is craving, aversion, and ignorance. The path of practice is not about violently stomping out the fire, which often just scatters the embers, but about methodically, mindfully, ceasing to add fuel. When the fuel is gone, the fire of dukkha naturally and peacefully subsides. This state of cessation This ultimate peace is called nirvana. In the West, the word nirvana has been co-opted and distorted, often used to describe a state of blissful indulgence, a perfect hamburger, or a rock band. In its original context, it is something far more profound and subtle. The literal meaning of the word is to extinguish or to blow out, again referencing the fire metaphor. It is the blowing out of the flames of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is not a heavenly paradise, not a golden city in the clouds that you earn as a reward after death. It is not a place at all. It is a state of mind, a quality of being that is accessible in this very life, right here and now. It is the unshakable freedom of the heart. It is the mind awakened to its own true nature, a nature that is not defined by the frantic, desperate grasping of the ego. To describe nirvana is to attempt to describe the taste of honey to someone who has never tasted sweetness, to describe the color blue to someone born blind. Language, born of a conditioned world of subjects and objects, of time and space, falters when trying to capture the unconditioned. This is why it is often described by what it is not. It is the unborn, the unaging, the unailing, the deathless, the sorrowless, the undefiled. It is the ultimate security from bondage. Think of your mind as it is now, perhaps agitated, easily disturbed by a critical comment, anxious about the future, regretful about the past, a slave to its likes and dislikes. The mind that has realized nirvana is the opposite. It is described as being like a deep lake, its surface perfectly still and clear, reflecting the sky and the trees exactly as they are, without distortion. It is no longer churned up by the winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. This does not mean the person becomes an unfeeling robot. On the contrary, feeling becomes more vivid, more direct, but it no longer has the power to destabilize the mind. Joy is felt fully, without the clinging that turns it into a future sorrow. Pain is felt, without the second arrow of resistance that turns it into suffering. Let us return to our story of the oil lamp. Imagine the lamp is your life. The flame is your experience of suffering, that constant, low-grade fever of dissatisfaction and anxiety. The oil in the lamp is tanha, the insatiable craving for more, for different, for better. It is the desire for pleasant sensations, the desire to become someone, the desire to get rid of what is unpleasant. The wick, which draws the oil up to the flame, is the sense of a solid, separate self, the ego, which is itself a construct of ignorance, avijja. We spend our entire lives frantically trying to keep the lamp full of oil, believing that if we just find the right kind of oil, the right relationship, the right job, the right amount of money, the flame will become a beautiful, pleasant glow. But all we do is ensure the fire keeps burning, consuming us in the process. The third noble truth, nirodha, tells us that there is another way. It suggests that instead of endlessly seeking more oil, we can begin to understand the nature of the lamp, the flame, the wick, and the oil itself. Through mindfulness and wisdom, we stop adding new oil. We see craving as it arises, and we choose not to feed it. We see aversion flare up, and we choose not to pour fuel on it. We investigate the nature of the I that seems to be at the center of it all, and we discover it is not as solid as we thought. As the existing oil is consumed, and no more is added, the flame begins to soften. It flickers gently, and then, without violence, without drama, it simply goes out. The cessation of the flame is nirvana. What is left is not a cold, dead lamp, but a mind that is finally at peace, cool, clear, and radiant. This is not an all-or-nothing proposition, a distant goal for a far-off future. Glimpses of Nirodha, small tastes of this peace, are possible in our daily lives. Every time you feel the urge to check your phone and instead choose to just breathe, that is a moment of cessation. Every time you feel anger rising and you are able to watch it without acting on it, allowing it to dissolve on its own, that is a taste of nirvana. Every time you let go of a long-held grudge, forgiving someone not for their sake, but for your own, you are experiencing the freedom of Nirodha. When you are completely absorbed in an act of kindness with no thought of reward, the fire of self-concern is, for that moment, extinguished. These are not small things. They are the training ground. They are the proof that this path is real and that its fruits can be enjoyed long before the final destination is reached. The importance of this third truth cannot be overstated. Without it, the first two truths would be a recipe for despair. If the Buddha had simply said, life is suffering, and the cause of suffering is craving, and stopped there, it would be a bleak and nihilistic message. But he did not. He presented a complete diagnosis. He said, here is the sickness, Dukkha. Here is the cause of the sickness, Tanha. And critically, he said, here is the proof that a cure exists, Nirodha. The existence of a cure is what provides the energy, the motivation, the faith to undertake the treatment. It transforms the entire teaching from a grim analysis into a practical and profoundly optimistic path to freedom. It is the lighthouse glimpsed through the fog, assuring the sailor that a safe harbor exists. It is the knowledge that the walls of our mental prison have a door. This promise of an end to suffering gives meaning and purpose to the entire spiritual journey. It assures us that our efforts are not in vain. We are not just endlessly managing our stress or coping with our anxiety. We are moving toward a definitive end of stress and anxiety altogether. We are walking a path that leads out of the tangled forest of confusion and into the open clearing of awakening. And so, the diagnosis has been made, the cause has been identified, and the possibility of a cure has been confirmed. A natural, urgent question arises. If there is a cure, what is it? If there is a safe harbor, how do we steer the ship to reach it? If the prison has a door, where is the key? This leads us directly, logically, and necessarily to the final piece of the puzzle, the fourth noble truth. It is the path itself, the how-to manual, the practical, step-by-step prescription for moving from suffering to serenity. This is the way. We have arrived at a place of profound possibility. We have acknowledged the diagnosis of dukkha, the universal experience of dissatisfaction. We have uncovered its root cause in the feverish thirst of tanha, and we have been given the great hope of nirodha, the truth that this fever can end, that a lasting peace is attainable. This is the promise, the destination, the safe harbor on the far shore. And so, the most practical and urgent question in the world arises: how? How do we get there from here? How do we walk the path from the shore of suffering to the shore of serenity? The answer lies in the fourth and final noble truth, the truth of the way, or Magga. This is not a statement of belief, nor a philosophical abstraction. It is a detailed, practical, and systematic guide for living. It is the Buddha's prescription for the healing of humanity, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. Before we walk through the 8 parts of this path, we must first understand the spirit in which it is to be walked. This is the principle of the middle way. The Buddha did not arrive at this understanding through theory, but through the laboratory of his own lived experience. He had explored life's 2 great extremes. First, as Prince Siddhartha, he lived in the extreme of sensual indulgence. He was surrounded by every imaginable pleasure, shielded from every sight of suffering, given every object of desire. Yet, in the midst of this perfect material world, he felt a deep spiritual emptiness. He realized that chasing pleasure, piling one fleeting gratification upon another, was like trying to fill a bottomless cup. It led not to happiness, but to a subtle and persistent anxiety, the fear of loss, and the gnawing hunger for the next thrill. This was the first dead end. So he left the palace and threw himself into the opposite extreme, that of severe self-mortification. For 6 years, he lived as an ascetic, torturing his body in the belief that by punishing the flesh, he could liberate the spirit. He fasted until his ribs showed through his skin like the slats of a broken shed. He held his breath until he felt violent pains in his head. He slept on beds of thorns and exposed himself to the harshest elements. He pushed his body to the very brink of death, only to discover that this too was a dead end. A mind that resides in a starved and weakened body cannot think clearly. A spirit tormented by self-inflicted pain has no capacity for deep insight. He had learned that punishing the body was just as fruitless as indulging it. It was in this moment of near total despair, having failed at both extremes, that the insight of the middle way arose. He recalled a memory from his childhood, sitting under a rose apple tree while his father performed a state ceremony. Without any effort, he had entered a state of natural, blissful concentration. It was not a state achieved through force or indulgence, but through balance and ease. He realized then that the path to awakening lay not in the extremes, but in a balanced middle, a path that nourishes both body and mind. The most beautiful illustration of this principle is the story of Sona, the lute player. Sona was a devoted monk who was practicing with ferocious, aggressive effort. He practiced walking meditation until the soles of his feet were cracked and bleeding. Yet he felt he was making no progress and became discouraged. The Buddha, knowing his background as a musician, went to him and asked, "Sona, before you became a monk, you were skilled at playing the lute, were you not?" "Yes, venerable sir," Sona replied. The Buddha then asked, "And what would happen if you tuned the strings of your lute too tightly?" Sona answered, "The strings would snap. And what if you tuned them too loosely? They would not produce any sound. But what if you tuned them not too tightly and not too loosely, but just right, balanced in tone?" Sona replied, "Then, venerable sir, the lute would produce a beautiful and enchanting melody." The Buddha looked at him with compassion and said, "So it is, Sona, with spiritual practice. If your effort is too intense, it leads to restlessness and agitation. If your effort is too slack, it leads to laziness and lethargy. Tune your effort, Sona. Find the balance, and you will find the way." And this is the spirit of the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not a path of grim austerity, nor one of hedonistic pleasure. It is a path of skillful, intelligent balance. The 8 factors of this path are not sequential steps, like rungs on a ladder that you climb one by one. They are more like the individual strands of a single, powerful rope. When woven together, they create a strength far greater than any single strand. They are to be cultivated simultaneously, each one supporting and deepening all the others. The path is traditionally divided into 3 sections, 3 trainings for the complete transformation of a human being. These are ethical conduct, sila, mental discipline, samadhi, and wisdom, panya. The foundation of the entire path is sila, or ethical conduct. This comprises 3 factors: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is the work of purifying our external actions, our engagement with the world. It is about learning to cause no harm with our words or our bodies. Why does the path begin here? Because it is impossible to find inner peace if your outer life is in turmoil. It is impossible to quiet the mind in meditation if you are filled with guilt and remorse over your actions. Sila is like preparing the soil before planting a garden. You must first diligently remove the rocks of harmful action and the weeds of dishonest speech. Right speech asks us to abstain from lying, from divisive talk that sets people against each other, from harsh words spoken in anger, and from idle chatter that distracts the mind. Right action asks us to abstain from harming living beings, from taking what is not given, and from sexual misconduct. Right livelihood asks us to earn a living in a way that does not bring harm to ourselves or others. By cultivating this ethical foundation, we create a life of blamelessness, a life of peace, which is the perfect ground for the deeper work of training the mind. The second training is samadhi, or mental discipline. Once the soil of our life is prepared, we can begin to plant the seeds of inner calm and focus. This training comprises 3 factors: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the heart of meditative practice. Right effort is the skillful application of our will. It is the gentle but persistent effort to let go of unwholesome states of mind, like anger, greed, and jealousy, and to actively cultivate wholesome states, like kindness, generosity, and compassion. Right mindfulness is the art of paying attention, of bringing a bare, non-judgmental awareness to the present moment, to our breath, our body, our feelings, and our thoughts. Right concentration is the fruit of this effort and mindfulness. It is the ability to unify the mind, to bring it to a state of calm, stable focus on a single object, freeing it from its usual scattered and distracted state. This training is the taming of the monkey mind. It is the process of transforming a mind that is wild, turbulent, and weak into one that is calm, powerful, and obedient to our highest intentions. The final training, which rests upon the foundation of the other 2, is panya, or wisdom. This is the ultimate goal of the path. If sila is preparing the ground, and samadhi is planting and watering the seed, then panya is the beautiful flower and the nourishing fruit that arises from that work. It comprises the first 2 factors of the path, which act as its bookends: right understanding and right intention. Right understanding is the clear seeing of reality as it is. It is the direct, experiential insight into the 4 noble truths. It is the wisdom that penetrates the illusions of permanence, satisfaction, and a solid self. It is the compass that guides the entire journey. Right intention, which flows from right understanding, is the purifying of our inner world, our motivation. It means cultivating the intention of renunciation, of letting go of grasping, the intention of loving, kindness, of wishing no harm to any being, and the intention of compassion, the active desire to relieve the suffering of others. These 3 trainings work together in an upward spiral. A life of ethical conduct, sila, leads to a mind free from remorse, which makes it easier to develop mental discipline, samadhi. A calm and concentrated mind, samadhi, is the perfect instrument for seeing things clearly, which gives rise to wisdom, panya. And as our wisdom, panya, deepens, our commitment to ethical conduct, sila, becomes effortless and natural. Each part supports and enhances every other part. This is not just a set of rules. It is a comprehensive design for living, a holistic blueprint for becoming a fully developed, fully awakened human being. It addresses our intellect, our heart, and our actions, weaving them together into a harmonious and liberated life. We now have the map in our hands. We have seen its breadth and its structure. We see how it offers a balanced middle way and how its different aspects work together to create a powerful synergy of transformation. Now, our journey requires us to look more closely at the map, to explore each region in detail. We will begin where the path itself begins, with the guiding light that illuminates the entire way, the division of wisdom. For without a clear understanding of where we are going and a pure intention to get there, our first steps will falter. We turn now to right understanding and right intention. We have been given the map, the Noble Eightfold Path. This balanced and practical middle way has been unrolled before us, showing a route from the familiar landscape of our anxiety to the far shore of a lasting peace. A map, however, is useless if we do not know how to read it. Before we take a single step on any journey, two things are essential. We must understand where we are and where we are going, and we must genuinely want to get there. Without these, we are simply wandering. This is the function of the first division of the path, the division of wisdom, or panya. It consists of two factors that serve as the guide and the engine for the entire journey: right understanding and right intention. They are the eyes that see the path and the heart that resolves to walk it. We begin with right understanding, or sammaditted. This is placed first because without at least some degree of right understanding, there can be no inspiration to even begin the journey. But we must be very clear about what understanding means in this context. It is not the accumulation of facts. It is not intellectual knowledge, nor is it the blind acceptance of a doctrine or creed. A person could memorize every word of the Buddhist scriptures and still possess no right understanding. Right understanding is not about knowing, it is about seeing. It is a seeing that is direct, intuitive, and transformative. It is the gradual clearing away of the dust and grime of our preconceptions, our biases, our fears, and our fantasies, so that we can see reality as it truly is. At its most fundamental level, right understanding is the comprehension of the Four Noble Truths. It is the clear recognition that there is dukkha, this pervasive unsatisfactoriness in our lives. It is the understanding that this dukkha has a cause, namely our craving and clinging tanha. It is the joyful realization that an end to this dukkha is possible, the state of nirodha, and it is the confidence that there is a practical path to that end, the Noble Eightfold Path itself. This framework is the initial provisional map that allows us to orient ourselves. Flowing from this is a clear understanding of the law of karma, or karma. This is the understanding that our intentional actions have consequences. Actions born from greed, hatred, and ignorance lead to painful results for ourselves and others. Actions born from generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom lead to happiness and peace. This is not a system of divine reward and punishment. It is an impersonal, natural law, like the law of gravity. Understanding karma is profoundly empowering. It frees us from the helplessness of believing we are victims of fate or chance. It places the keys to our happiness and our sorrow directly into our own hands. In every moment, with every choice, we are planting the seeds of our future. Right understanding means we learn to distinguish the wholesome seeds from the unwholesome ones. As our practice deepens, right understanding evolves into a more penetrating insight into the very nature of existence. This is the wisdom that sees the three marks of existence, or tilakkhana, in all phenomena. The first mark is anicca, impermanence. We begin to see, not just intellectually, but in the fabric of our own experience, that everything is in a state of constant flux. Our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, The world around us, nothing is static. Everything arises, changes, and passes away. The second mark is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, because everything is impermanent. Any attempt to cling to it as a source of lasting, ultimate happiness is doomed to fail. This is the subtle pain woven into conditioned existence. The third and most profound mark is anatta, no self. Through careful observation, we begin to see that there is no fixed, solid, independent I at the center of our experience. What we call self is, in reality, a dynamic, interdependent process of body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, all changing from moment to moment. Right understanding is the wisdom that sees this process clearly, without clinging to the illusion of a separate, permanent self. If right understanding is the clear seeing of the map, right intention, or samasankappa, is the conscious choice to orient our life's journey in the direction the map indicates. Understanding without intention is passive, inert. Intention is what activates wisdom and channels it into our lives. It is the heart's response to the mind's clarity. It is about purifying our motivations, the why behind everything we do, say, and think. Right intention is threefold, representing a turning away from the causes of suffering and a turning towards the path of liberation. The first is the intention of renunciation. This is the resolve to let go of our addiction to craving and clinging. It is not about rejecting the world or living a life of harsh deprivation. It is about finding a profound sense of inner freedom by loosening the grip of desire. It is seeing the trap of sensual obsession, the endless chase for more pleasure, more validation, more possessions, and making the conscious choice to turn towards simplicity, contentment, and inner peace. It is the intention that says, I will not be a slave to my desires. The second is the intention of goodwill, or loving kindness. This is the resolve to abandon anger, resentment, and ill will. It is the conscious cultivation of metta, a warm, boundless, and unconditional goodwill towards all beings, without exception. It begins with ourselves, learning to replace the inner critic with a voice of kindness. It then extends outwards, to our loved ones, to neutral people, and even to those we find difficult. It is the intention that says, may all beings be happy and free from hostility. The third is the intention of harmlessness, or compassion. This is the resolve to cause no harm, to abandon cruelty in all its forms. It is the cultivation of karuna, the trembling of the heart in response to the suffering of others, coupled with the active desire to alleviate that suffering. It is a deep recognition of our shared vulnerability as living beings. It is the intention that says, I will not add to the suffering of this world. There is a beautiful story that illustrates the power of intention. Two men were working on a construction site, performing the exact same task, chipping away at large blocks of stone. A visitor came by and asked the first man, "What are you doing?" The man, scowling and wiping sweat from his brow, grumbled, "I'm cutting stone. It's hard, boring work under a hot sun, and I can't wait for the day to be over." The visitor then approached the second man and asked the same question. The second man looked up, his eyes bright with purpose, and said with a smile, "I am building a cathedral that will stand for 1,000 years, a place where people will come to find peace and connect with the divine." They were performing the identical physical action, but their inner experience, their sense of purpose, and the quality of their effort were worlds apart. One was living in a prison of drudgery, the other was animated by a sacred purpose. The only difference was their intention. This is the power we cultivate at the very start of the path. We learn to look at our own thoughts. Is this thought coming from a place of wanting, of grasping, or from a place of letting go? Is this thought tinged with irritation and judgment, or with goodwill? Does this thought lead to harm or to compassion? Right understanding gives us the clarity to ask these questions. Right intention gives us the resolve to choose the wholesome path again and again. They are the two wings of a bird. One without the other cannot fly. Together, they lift us from the ground of our habitual patterns and set us on the course towards liberation. With this wisdom as our guide, with our minds oriented and our hearts resolved, we are now prepared to take the next steps. A map and a compass are essential, but the journey requires walking. We must learn how to translate this inner clarity into our tangible, everyday behavior. Our noble intentions must be expressed through our words and our actions in the world. This is how we begin to build our own cathedral. And so, the path now leads us from the inner world of wisdom to the outer world of our conduct, to the next division of the path, the division of ethical conduct, sila. If the division of wisdom is the map and compass for our journey, then the division of ethical conduct is the very ground on which we walk. Wisdom that remains a private, internal experience is incomplete. It must be embodied. It must inform our every interaction with the world. This section of the path, often known by the single Pali word sila, is concerned with how we manifest our inner understanding through our outer behavior. It is about purifying our speech and our actions so that they cease to be a source of conflict and agitation for ourselves and for others. A mind troubled by guilt, remorse, or the fear of discovery cannot find the stillness required for deep insight. Ethical conduct, therefore, is not about following a set of rigid rules to please an external authority. It is a profoundly practical and compassionate training we undertake for the sake of our own peace. It is the process of building a stable foundation for our inner home. We begin with right speech, for our words are the most frequent and often most careless way we interact with the world. A word is a powerful thing. It can be a bridge or a wall. It can be a balm that soothes or a blade that wounds. We release hundreds, even thousands of them each day, often with little thought to their consequence. The practice of right speech invites us to transform our words from unconscious habits into conscious tools of clarity and kindness. This practice is traditionally understood in 4 parts. First, it is the practice of speaking truthfully. This means more than simply avoiding outright lies. It is a deep commitment to reality. It means we refrain from exaggeration that makes our stories more dramatic, from subtle distortions that cast us in a better light, from making promises we cannot keep. Living in this way brings an incredible simplicity and lightness to our lives. We no longer need to maintain a complex web of fabrications, no longer need to remember which version of a story we told to which person. Our word becomes dependable, and our mind, unburdened by the stress of deceit, becomes calm and clear. Second, right speech means abstaining from divisive speech. This is the refusal to use our words to create conflict and disharmony. It is the practice of not carrying tales from one person to another, of not repeating gossip that damages another's reputation, of not speaking in a way that poisons one friend against another. The energy of gossip can be seductive, making us feel like we are on the inside of a special circle. But it is a toxic energy, creating suspicion and discord. The practice here is to become a force for unity. We learn to speak in ways that encourage reconciliation and understanding, and we learn the profound wisdom of silence. recognizing that if our words will not help to bring people together, it is often best not to speak at all. Third, it is the practice of abstaining from harsh speech. Our words, spoken in anger or contempt, can be brutal weapons, leaving wounds that last far longer than any physical blow. Harsh speech includes cursing, insults, yelling, cruel sarcasm, and any language intended to belittle and inflict pain. The training is to tame this aggression and instead cultivate speech that is gentle, kind, and considerate. It is to speak to others, even during moments of disagreement, with a fundamental respect for their dignity. This practice also applies to our own internal dialogue. So many of us have a relentlessly harsh inner critic. Learning to speak kindly to others begins with learning to speak kindly to ourselves. Fourth, right speech asks us to refrain from idle chatter. This is the practice of recognizing the value of silence and purpose in communication. So much of our conversation is simply noise, a way to fill empty space, a stream of pointless talk that clutters the mind and dissipates our energy. This doesn't mean we must always be serious and solemn, but it does invite us to ask, is what I am about to say true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it beneficial? The practice is to speak at the right time about things that are meaningful and helpful, creating a space for quiet contemplation rather than constant distraction. From our words, we turn to our physical conduct, to right action. Like speech, our actions ripple out into the world, creating consequences for ourselves and everyone we touch. Right action is the resolve to make those ripples peaceful ones. It consists of 3 core trainings. The first, and the very heart of Buddhist ethics, is to abstain from taking the life of any living being. This is a commitment to non-violence in its most direct form. It flows from a deep empathy, the recognition that all beings, from the largest mammal to the smallest insect, share with us a desire to live and to avoid pain. When we adopt this principle, we become a sanctuary of safety in the world. Others, both human and animal, can feel secure in our presence. The second training is to abstain from taking what is not freely given. This is the practice of complete honesty, of refraining from stealing, cheating in business, or taking advantage of others financially. It is about respecting the belongings and resources of others as we would have them respect our own. This fosters a community of trust and removes the mental agitation that comes from dishonesty and the fear of being caught. The third training is to abstain from sexual misconduct. This is about bringing mindfulness, respect, and compassion into our intimate lives. It means causing no harm to ourselves or others through our sexual behavior. This includes refraining from adultery, which breaks commitments and causes deep pain, and avoiding any form of sexual exploitation or coercion. It is a commitment to conduct our intimate relationships with an awareness of their emotional and karmic consequences, ensuring they are based on mutual respect, kindness, and consent. Finally, the division of ethical conduct extends into the area where we spend a vast portion of our lives, our work. This is right livelihood. It is the principle that our profession should be an extension of our practice, not a contradiction of it. We are asked to find a way to support ourselves that does not, at its core, involve harming others. The classical texts list trades such as being a butcher, a weapons maker, a slave trader, or a poison peddler. In our modern world, we can understand this more broadly. Does our work depend on deception? Does it exploit people or the environment? Does it promote addiction or violence? The question is not about finding a perfect job, as few exist. It is about bringing a conscious, ethical inquiry to our work. It is about trying, to the best of our ability, to align how we earn a living with our deepest values of harmlessness and compassion. This entire sphere of ethical conductor speech, our actions, our work is the foundation upon which all deeper progress is built. It is a training in harmlessness, a daily practice of peace. By living in this way, we create a life that is free from the inner toxins of guilt and remorse. We create a serene external environment that naturally supports a serene internal one. Our mind, no longer needing to defend, justify, or hide, can begin to relax and settle. With this foundation of wisdom giving us direction, and this foundation of ethical living giving us stability, our house is now in order. We are ready to turn our attention fully inward, to the wild and untamed inhabitants of the house itself, our own wandering thoughts and turbulent emotions. The journey now takes us into the heart of mental cultivation, the final division of the path, the great training in mental discipline. We have arrived at the very heart of the path, the engine room of transformation. We have used wisdom as our map to understand the terrain, and we have used ethical conduct to build a solid and peaceful foundation for our journey. Now, we must enter the house of the mind itself. For most of us, this inner world is a chaotic place, a whirlwind of racing thoughts, turbulent emotions, and relentless distractions. It is here that the deepest work is done. This brings us to the third and final division of the path, the great training in mental discipline. This is the inner workout, the gymnasium for the mind, where we cultivate the strength, stability, and clarity needed to find lasting peace. This training consists of three interwoven factors: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Together, they are the art of taming the wild mind and turning it into our greatest ally. Let us begin with right effort. The word effort can sometimes sound like a strain, a grim, joyless struggle. But in this context, it is not a tense, white-knuckled forcing of the will. It is a skillful, gentle, and consistent application of energy, like the steady hand of a master gardener tending to their garden. This practice of right effort is a beautiful and practical four-part strategy for cultivating a healthy and beautiful mind. The first effort is the work of prevention. This is the gardener building a fence around the garden to keep out unwanted animals. In our minds, this means guarding our senses. We become aware that unwholesome states like greed, anger, and jealousy are often triggered by what we see, hear, and think about. So we practice a wise restraint. We might choose to spend less time consuming media that fuels our anger or envy. We might notice a conversation turning towards gossip and skillfully steer it in a different direction. This is not about hiding from the world, but about wisely choosing not to invite trouble into our minds. We protect our inner garden so that negative seeds have less opportunity to be planted. The second effort is the work of abandoning. This is the gardener diligently weeding. No matter how good our fence is, weeds will inevitably sprout. In our minds, these weeds are the unwholesome thoughts and emotions that have already arisen. When a surge of anger appears, or a wave of obsessive desire, we don't just let it grow and spread, but we also don't react with violence, trying to suppress it, which can often make it stronger. Instead, with mindfulness, we recognize the weed for what it is. We see its harmful nature, and then, gently but firmly, we let it go. We withdraw our attention from it. We might apply an antidote, such as deliberately cultivating thoughts of loving kindness when anger is present, or reflecting on the impermanence of an object when we feel intense craving for it. This is the active, moment-to-moment work of clearing the garden of our mind. The third effort is the work of cultivation. This is the joyful task of planting beautiful flowers and nourishing vegetables. It is not enough just to remove the negative. We must actively cultivate the positive. We make a conscious effort to plant wholesome seeds in our mind. We deliberately reflect on gratitude, bringing to mind the things we are thankful for. We practice generosity. We read inspiring texts, listen to wise teachers, and spend time with people who bring out the best in us. We look for the good in others and in ourselves. This is an act of intentionally creating beauty, kindness, and clarity in our inner world. The fourth and final effort is the work of maintenance. Once the garden is flourishing, the gardener's work is not done. The beautiful flowers of kindness and the strong plants of wisdom must be nurtured. This is the effort of sustaining the wholesome states that we have cultivated. When we experience a moment of peace, we learn to cherish it and allow it to deepen. When clarity arises, we nurture it. We continue to water the wholesome seeds with our attention and practice, allowing them to grow strong and resilient until they become the new landscape of our mind, our default way of being. This entire fourfold practice of right effort is made possible by the second factor of mental discipline, right mindfulness. Mindfulness is the central pillar of this inner training. It is the quality of awareness that sees what needs to be done. Without mindfulness, we are lost. If a weed of anger grows in the garden of your mind, but you are not mindful, you will not even know it is there until it has become a thorny thicket. If you are not mindful, you will be lost in a daydream while you are supposed to be planting seeds of kindness. Right mindfulness is the clear, shining light of attention that illuminates our inner world just as it is. It is a calm, steady, non-judgmental awareness of what is happening in the present moment. It is the director of the other factors. Mindfulness sees the weed, and right effort pulls it out. Mindfulness sees the bare patch of soil, and right effort plants a flower. Because this quality of awareness is so foundational to the entire path, we will devote our entire next section to exploring its subtleties and its practice. When right effort and right mindfulness work together for some time, the third factor of this division begins to emerge: right concentration. If the untrained mind is like the scattered light of a bare light bulb, diffuse and weak, then the concentrated mind is like the light from that same bulb gathered by a lens into a powerful, coherent laser beam. Concentration is the ability to collect all the scattered energies of the mind and unify them on a single point. In our daily lives, our minds are fragmented, constantly jumping from one thought to another, pulled in 100 different directions by sights, sounds, memories, and worries. This state is exhausting and inefficient. Right concentration is the antidote. Through a sustained practice, such as keeping the mindful attention on the feeling of the breath, the mind gradually begins to settle. It stops wandering off so often. It becomes calm, pliant, and steady. This state of deep concentration brings with it profound benefits. There is a great sense of peace, joy, and inner stillness. The mind, free from its usual chatter and agitation, is able to rest and heal. It is a state of deep mental refreshment, but right concentration is more than just a pleasant feeling or a mental vacation. It is the platform for the deepest wisdom. When the surface of a lake is choppy and turbulent, you cannot see what lies beneath. But when the wind dies down and the surface becomes perfectly still and clear, you can see all the way to the bottom. Similarly, when the mind is made perfectly still and clear through concentration, it gains the power to see into the true nature of reality. It is from this stable, silent platform that the great insights into impermanence and no-self arise, the insights that cut the roots of suffering once and for all. These three factors, effort, mindfulness, and concentration, are like a team of experts working together to tame a wild elephant, which represents our mind. The strong post you tie the elephant to is your object of meditation. Like the breath, the rope you use to tie the elephant to the post is right mindfulness, the constant awareness that keeps the mind connected to its object, and the patient, persistent, and skillful work of the trainer who coaxes and encourages the elephant to stay calm and by the post is right effort. At first, the elephant is wild and pulls violently against the rope, but through gentle, steady effort and constant mindful awareness, it eventually cools down and stands peacefully by the post. A wild, destructive force has been transformed into a calm, powerful, and immensely useful ally. This is the work of mental discipline. It is the process of transforming our own minds from our greatest obstacle into our greatest friend. And the key that unlocks this entire process, the skill that underlies both effort and concentration, is the gentle, moment-to-moment practice of paying attention. And so, it is to this remarkable, life-changing art of mindfulness that we will now turn our full attention. If there is one word from the entire treasury of Buddhist thought that has broken through into the modern world, it is mindfulness. We find it on the covers of magazines, in corporate wellness seminars, and in countless apps that promise to bring us calm in just a few minutes a day. But in this journey from an ancient contemplative practice to a modern mainstream phenomenon, its deepest meaning is often lost. It can be mistaken for a simple relaxation technique, a quick fix for stress, or a way to become more productive. These can be its side effects, but they are not its heart. To truly understand mindfulness is to understand the art of waking up to your own life. It is the practice of inhabiting the present moment, for the present moment is the only place that life ever truly happens. For most of us, most of the time, our bodies are in one place, while our minds are somewhere else entirely. We are masters of mental time travel. We spend vast amounts of our precious energy living in the past. We sit in meetings, replaying a clumsy conversation from the day before. We drive our cars, stewing over an injustice from a decade ago. We lie in bed at night, caught in a loop of regret over a past mistake. The past is a ghost. It has no substance. It exists only as a memory trace in our minds. Yet we allow this ghost to haunt the corridors of our present, whispering its stories of what could have been, robbing us of the vitality of the now. When we are not in the past, we are launching ourselves into the future. We eat our lunch, but our mind is rehearsing a difficult conversation we need to have later. We play with our children, but our mind is worrying about an upcoming deadline or a pending medical test. We walk in nature, but our mind is consumed with planning our next vacation. The future is a dream. It has not yet happened. It is a projection, a fantasy. Yet, we exhaust ourselves by living in this imaginary world, a world of endless anxieties and expectations. The tragic consequence of this constant time travel is that we miss the only thing that is real, our actual life, unfolding moment by moment. Life is a string of present moments. If we are never fully present for any of them, can we say we have ever truly lived? Mindfulness is the antidote to this state of absence. The ancient Pali word for it, sati, carries the meaning of to remember. What is it that we are remembering? We are remembering to come back. We are remembering to return from the phantom worlds of past and future to the living reality of the here and now. The most widely used definition of mindfulness captures its essence perfectly. It is the practice of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let's look at that. We are paying attention, which means it is a conscious and active process. We are doing it on purpose, with intention. We are focused on the present moment, not what was or what will be. And, most crucially, we are doing it non-judgmentally. This is the secret ingredient. We are not trying to label our experience as good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, right or wrong. We are simply allowing it to be what it is, and we are watching it with a kind, open, and impartial awareness. We become the witness to our experience, not the judge and jury. Imagine a tightrope walker, poised to cross a great canyon on a thin wire. Her life depends entirely on her ability to be mindful. She cannot afford to look back at the platform she just left, replaying her first step. If she does, she will lose her balance. She cannot afford to fixate on the platform on the other side, dreaming of the safety and applause that awaits her. If she does, she will lose her footing. Her entire being, her very survival, depends on her complete and total absorption in the present moment. She must be aware of the precise feeling of the rope beneath her feet, the subtle shifting of her weight, the gentle sway of the balancing pole in her hands, the feeling of the air on her skin. Her life is in this step, and then the next one, and then the next. Our life is this tightrope walk. The chasm below is the confusion and suffering of a distracted mind. To walk it with grace, and to arrive safely on the other side, we must learn to bring our full attention to the step we are taking right now. This practice is not something reserved for a quiet room or a meditation cushion. The ultimate training ground for mindfulness is your own daily life. You can transform any mundane activity into a profound practice of presence. Consider the act of drinking a cup of tea. Typically, we might drink it while reading the news, planning our day, lost in thought. A mindful cup of tea is a different universe of experience. You feel the warmth of the cup in your hands. You watch the steam rising. You notice the color and the aroma. You bring the cup to your lips and you actually taste the tea, feeling the warm liquid in your mouth and the sensation of swallowing. For those few moments, you are just there, drinking tea. The world comes alive. You can practice mindful walking by, feeling the physical sensations of your feet, on the ground, the lifting, the moving, the placing. You can practice mindful listening by giving another person the rare and beautiful gift of your complete, undivided attention, listening not just to their words but to the meaning behind them, without planning your own response. The anchor for all these practices, the one that is always available to us, is the breath. The breath is always happening in the present moment. You cannot breathe in the past, and you cannot breathe in the future. At any time during the day, no matter how chaotic things get, you can return to the feeling of one breath, just one. Feel the air entering your body, and feel the air leaving your body. It is a neurological reset button, a portal that brings you immediately out of the frantic world of thought and back into the calm reality of your own body, right here, right now. As we cultivate this quality of presence, we begin to experience its profound benefits. Much of our stress is a product of our thinking, worrying about what might happen or ruminating on what did. By anchoring ourselves in the present, we find a safe harbor from these mental storms. We also develop a powerful self-awareness. We start to see our own habits clearly. We can feel the first flicker of anger when it is just a spark, rather than only noticing it when it has become a raging fire. This awareness gives us a precious space of freedom, a moment in which we can choose how to respond rather than simply reacting blindly. And perhaps most beautifully, mindfulness gives us back our lives. The world, which can seem grey and mundane through the filter of distraction, becomes vibrant and rich with detail. Food has more flavor, music has more depth, and the faces of our loved ones become new and fascinating again. We stop sleepwalking through our existence, and we finally wake up. Practicing mindfulness informally throughout our day is life-changing. But the habits of the mind are deep, like well-worn grooves in a stone. To truly retrain these patterns, it is immensely helpful to engage in a more systematic and formal practice. Just as a musician practices scales to be able to play music more freely, we can practice formal meditation to strengthen the muscle of mindfulness. This formal training is where we go to the mental gym, a dedicated time and space to work directly with the nature of the mind. And so, it is to this formal practice of meditation, this art of taming the wild and wonderful monkey mind, that we shall now turn. We have arrived at the gymnasium of the mind, the formal practice of meditation. This is where we take the beautiful theory of mindfulness and put it into systematic practice. For many, the very word meditation can conjure images that are intimidating or alien, or it may bring up feelings of failure from past attempts. The most common reason people feel they cannot meditate is because they believe they cannot stop their own minds from thinking. They sit down, close their eyes, and are immediately met with a storm of thoughts, plans, memories, and worries. This internal chatter, this restless, agitated quality of the untrained mind, is often called the monkey mind, an image that perfectly captures its nature of swinging frantically from one branch of thought to the next, never staying still. So let us begin by clearing away the greatest myth about meditation. The goal is not to stop your thoughts or to empty your mind. The mind produces thoughts just as the heart beats. It is what it does. To try and force your mind to be silent is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The moment you release the pressure, it will shoot up with even greater force. The goal of meditation is not to stop the river of thought, but to change your relationship to it. The practice teaches us how to step out of the turbulent current, to sit peacefully on the riverbank, and to simply watch the thoughts, feelings, and sensations float by without getting swept away by them. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that is aware of the thoughts. This shift in perspective is the beginning of freedom. A beautiful analogy for this process is that of a jar of muddy water. Imagine you pick up a sealed glass jar filled with water and a large amount of fine mud. If you shake the jar, the water becomes completely opaque and cloudy. This is the normal state of our mind, churned up by the constant mud of our agitated thinking. Now, if you wanted the water to become clear, what would you do? Would you try to plunge your hand in and force the mud to the bottom? Of course not. That would only stir it up more. Would you try to use a tool to scoop out the mud? That would be impossibly difficult and messy. The wise and effortless solution is simply to place the jar on a stable surface and let it be. Do nothing. By allowing the jar to rest, the laws of nature take over. The mud, being heavier than the water, will naturally, gradually begin to settle. Moment by moment, the water becomes clearer until finally it is perfectly transparent, with all the mud resting peacefully at the bottom. Our mind is this jar of water. Meditation is the act of placing the mind on the stable surface of the present moment and allowing its muddy thoughts to naturally settle. We don't have to force them down. We simply have to stop shaking the jar. The practice of mindfulness of breathing is one of the most ancient and effective ways to do this. So, how do we begin? First, we find our posture. There is no need to twist yourself into an uncomfortable position. The key is to create a posture that embodies both stability and ease. You can sit on a chair with your feet flat on the floor and your back straight but not rigid, or you can sit cross-legged on a cushion on the floor. The important thing is that your spine is upright, like a noble stack of coins, which supports a state of alertness. Let your hands rest comfortably in your lap. You can allow your eyes to gently close, or if you prefer, you can leave them slightly open with a soft, unfocused gaze toward the floor a few feet in front of you. The invitation is to find a posture you can hold with stillness and dignity. Second, we find our anchor. Having settled the body, we now settle the mind. We bring our attention to the physical sensations of the breath, somewhere in the body. For many, the most convenient spot is at the tip of the nostrils, feeling the subtle sensation of the cool air entering on the in-breath and the slightly warmer air passing over the skin on the out-breath. For others, the sensation of the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen is a more noticeable anchor. There is no right or wrong place. Simply choose the one that feels most clear to you. The instruction is profoundly simple. Rest your attention on these sensations. When you are breathing in, just know that you are breathing in. When you are breathing out, just know that you are breathing out. You are not trying to control the breath or change it in any way. You are simply allowing it to be natural, and you are resting your awareness on its rhythm. Third, and this is the most important part of the entire practice, is the art of the return. Very soon after you begin, perhaps after only 1 or 2 breaths, you will find that your mind has wandered away. The monkey has swung to another branch. You might be planning dinner, replaying a conversation, or worrying about a future event. This is not a mistake. This is not a sign that you are failing. This is simply what minds do. The moment you realize, I'm thinking, that moment of recognition is a moment of pure mindfulness. That is the victory. And the instruction in that moment is not one of self-criticism or frustration. It is to gently acknowledge where the mind has been, perhaps with a soft mental note of thinking or wandering, and then, with great kindness, to guide your attention back to your anchor, the physical sensation of the breath. This process will repeat itself hundreds of times in a single sitting. You will rest on the breath, the mind will wander, you will notice, and you will gently return. The practice is not about perfecting the art of staying on the breath. The practice is the art of returning. Every single time you notice your mind has wandered, and you bring it back with kindness, you are strengthening the muscle of your attention. Each return is a small act of training, a moment of waking up. Within this simple practice, 2 distinct qualities are being developed. The first is called samatha, or tranquility. This is the settling of the mud. As you continue to rest your attention on the breath, the mind gradually becomes calmer, more stable, and more unified. The frantic energy begins to subside. This brings with it feelings of peace, pleasure, and ease. This is the stabilizing aspect of meditation. The second quality is called vipassana, or insight. From the stable platform of a tranquil mind, you begin to see the nature of your experience more clearly. You watch thoughts arise out of nowhere, linger for a moment, and then vanish. You see feelings bubble up and then dissolve. By watching this constant parade, you gain a direct, experiential insight into the truth of impermanence. You see that you are not in control of your thoughts, and that they are not the solid you that you believe them to be. This is the wisdom aspect of meditation. Mindfulness of breathing is a masterful practice because it cultivates both of these qualities at once. The breath acts as an anchor to develop tranquility, and the observation of the mind's wandering away from the breath becomes the object of insight. This is the formal training. It is simple, but it is not always easy. It requires patience and a gentle, compassionate persistence. We are not trying to achieve a mystical state. We are simply showing up, moment by moment, to the reality of our own mind and learning to meet it with awareness and kindness. This practice of calming the mind and observing it clearly is foundational, but the garden of the mind can be used not only for weeding and clearing, but also for the active planting of beautiful flowers. Meditation is not just a passive observation. It can also be an active cultivation of positive qualities of the heart. And one of the most powerful and transformative of these practices is the cultivation of loving kindness. And so, we now turn from the coolness of observation to the warmth of cultivation, to explore the radiant practice of metta. If the practice of mindfulness can be seen as the cool, clear light of awareness, then the practice we now turn to is its essential counterpart, the radiant warmth of the heart. While mindfulness observes our experience with a discerning clarity, the practice of loving kindness actively cultivates a profound quality of warmth, connection, and goodwill. In a world that often feels fractured by division, cynicism, and fear, this practice is a radical act of healing. It is the systematic training of the heart away from its habitual patterns of judgment, irritation, and anger, and towards a boundless and unconditional friendliness. This is the art of cultivating what in the Pali language is called metta. Metta is more than just a fleeting emotion. It is a deep, abiding wish for all beings to be happy and well. It is not the possessive, conditional love of romance, nor is it limited to the members of our own family or tribe. It is a universal, impartial goodwill, like the light and warmth of the sun, which shines on all without discrimination, on the beautiful flower and the thorny weed, on the saint and the sinner. It asks for nothing in return. It is a pure, untethered offering of friendliness to the world, and it serves as the direct and powerful antidote to the poisons of anger, resentment, ill will, and fear. You cannot hold the warmth of loving kindness and the bitterness of hatred in your heart at the same exact moment. One displaces the other. The practice of metta is the methodical and gentle replacement of our habit of aversion with a new habit of unconditional friendliness. The journey of cultivating loving kindness begins in what might seem like a surprising place, with ourselves. For many of us, this is the most difficult step. We are often our own harshest critics, our minds filled with a relentless inner monologue of judgment and self-recrimination. The idea of directing kindness towards ourselves can feel awkward, selfish, or even undeserved, but it is the essential and non-negotiable foundation of the entire practice. You cannot genuinely offer water to others from an empty well. You cannot truly wish for others to be happy if you are fundamentally at war with yourself. As the safety instructions on an airplane remind us, you must secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others. Making our own heart a place of refuge and friendliness is not an act of narcissism. It is the prerequisite for having any genuine warmth to offer the world. The practice itself is simple and beautiful. In a comfortable, meditative posture, you begin by silently repeating a series of phrases directed towards your own being. Classic phrases include, "May I be happy. May I be safe and protected. May I be healthy and strong. May I live my life with ease." It is important to know that you do not have to force a particular feeling. The feeling is not the point of departure. It is the destination. The practice is to simply offer the phrases with sincerity and patience, like planting seeds in the garden of your heart. At first, you may feel nothing at all, or you may even feel resistance. This is perfectly normal. You just continue to gently plant the seeds of goodwill. In time, with repetition, the warmth will begin to bloom. Once you have established some sense of warmth for yourself, the practice then expands outwards in a series of brilliant and psychologically astute stages. Next, you bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom you have easy and uncomplicated feelings of affection and respect. It could be a beloved mentor, a close friend, or a family member. You hold their image in your mind, and you extend the very same wishes to them. May you be happy. May you be safe and protected. May you be healthy and strong. May you live your life with ease. Because the affection is already there, this stage helps the feeling of loving kindness to flow more naturally and gain momentum. The third stage is where the practice begins to stretch the boundaries of the heart. You bring to mind a neutral person. This is someone you see in your daily life, but for whom you have no strong feelings one way or the other. The cashier at your local market, the person who delivers your mail, a stranger you pass on the street. You hold this person in your mind, and you extend the exact same wishes of goodwill to them. This is a powerful practice because it begins to break down the invisible walls of indifference that separate us from the vast majority of humanity. We start to see that this neutral person is just like us, someone who wants to be happy, who wants to be safe, who experiences their own joys and sorrows. They cease to be a mere background object in our lives and become a fellow human being. The fourth stage is the most challenging and, in many ways, the most transformative. You bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom you have conflict, or for whom you harbor feelings of resentment or anger. It is wise to start with someone only mildly difficult, rather than a source of deep trauma. The purpose here is not to condone their harmful actions or to force a false sense of reconciliation. The purpose is to free yourself from the corrosive poison of your own anger. Holding on to hatred is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. By offering the phrases, "May you be happy," "May you be safe," you are performing a radical act of letting go for your own sake. The happiness you wish for them is the true happiness that arises from wisdom and kindness, a state of being in which they would naturally cease to cause harm. This practice is the alchemy that transforms the lead of your resentment into the gold of a free heart. Finally, after working with these individuals, you expand your awareness outwards in all directions. You radiate the feeling of loving kindness to all beings, without exception. You extend it to the people in your home, your neighborhood, your city, and your country. You extend it to all people across the world. You extend it to all animals, all creatures living in the water, in the sky, and on the earth. You extend it to all beings, seen and unseen, near and far. You imagine this warmth, this light of goodwill, filling the entire universe, holding all of life in a boundless, friendly embrace, with the simple, powerful wish, may all beings everywhere be happy. The power of such a practice should not be underestimated. There is a famous story from the life of the Buddha that illustrates its force. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, conspired to assassinate him. He got a notoriously fierce and powerful elephant named Nalagiri, intoxicated and enraged, and then unleashed him onto the narrow lane where the Buddha was walking. The people fled in terror. The Buddha's loyal attendant, Ananda, tried to shield him with his own body, but the Buddha gently asked him to step aside. As the elephant charged, trumpeting with rage, the Buddha did not run or show any fear. He simply stood still and radiated an immense, powerful, and unwavering field of pure loving kindness towards the animal. It is said that as the enraged elephant entered this palpable field of goodwill, its fury simply dissolved, its steps slowed, its head lowered, and it eventually knelt peacefully at the Buddha's feet. This story teaches us that loving kindness is not a weak, sentimental emotion. It is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, capable of taming the deepest rage, both in others and within ourselves. We practice not by waiting to feel love, but by choosing to generate the intention of it. The feeling is the fruit, but the willed intention is the seed. With each repetition of the phrases, we are carving new neural pathways in the brain, creating a new habit of the heart. We are choosing friendliness over fear, connection over judgment, and warmth over aversion. As we practice both the clear seeing of mindfulness and the warm heart of loving kindness, we become more and more intimate with the nature of our own experience. And as we sit with this present moment reality, one fundamental truth begins to dawn on us with undeniable clarity. Everything is constantly changing. This direct encounter with the ceaseless flow of life is the gateway to one of the path's most profound and liberating insights, the wisdom of impermanence. Through the practices of mindfulness and loving kindness, we have been learning to arrive more fully in the present moment. We have been training ourselves to sit on the riverbank of our own experience, watching the flow of life with clarity and with warmth. As we spend more time simply being present, we cannot help but notice a fundamental, universal, and inescapable truth about the nature of that river. It is always moving. Nothing is static. Everything is in a constant state of flux. This is the great and profound insight of impermanence, the first of the three fundamental marks of all existence. To understand impermanence is not to learn a depressing philosophy, but to see a liberating truth that can untie the deepest knots of our suffering. Look anywhere in the universe, and you will see this law at work. Great mountains, which seem to be the very symbol of permanence, are slowly but surely being worn down by wind and rain. Stars are born in fiery nebulae, shine for billions of years, and then die in spectacular explosions. In our own world, seasons turn, cities rise and fall, and cultures evolve and disappear. There is nothing in the outer world that you can point to that is not subject to this law of change. This same law governs our own lives with an intimate and often painful immediacy. Our bodies are in a constant process of transformation. We are born, we grow, we reach a peak, and we begin the slow, inevitable process of aging and decay. The face you see in the mirror today is not the same one you saw 10 years ago, nor is it the one you will see in 10 years' time. Our relationships, too, are flowing rivers. Friendships deepen or drift apart. Romances ignite and sometimes fade. The family dynamic is never the same from one year to the next. Our possessions, which we work so hard to acquire, break, become obsolete, or are lost. Everything we try to hold on to in the external world is like trying to hold a fistful of water. It inevitably slips through our fingers. Nowhere is this dance of impermanence more vivid than in our own inner world. Our feelings are the most obvious example. A moment of intense joy arises, and it feels as though it will last forever, but it gives way to contentment, then perhaps to boredom, and then to irritation. A wave of sadness or anger can feel all-consuming, as if we have drowned in it, but it too eventually recedes. Our thoughts are even more ephemeral, like clouds scudding across the sky. A thought appears, captures our attention for a moment, and then vanishes, replaced by another and another in a ceaseless stream. The truth of impermanence itself is not suffering. The change of seasons is not suffering. A headache going away is not suffering. The suffering arises from a single source, our resistance to this fundamental law. Our suffering is the product of our own mind's futile and exhausting attempt to make permanent that which is, by its very nature, impermanent. We create our own pain when we cling to the pleasant, push away the unpleasant, and live in the delusion that we can somehow freeze the ever-flowing river of life. We cling to youth, and so we suffer at the sight of a wrinkle. We cling to a perfect moment of happiness, and so we suffer when it ends, forever comparing future moments to that golden memory. We suffer because we want reality to be other than it is. We are arguing with the universe, and it is a fight we are guaranteed to lose. There is a beautiful practice in Tibetan Buddhism that illustrates this wisdom perfectly. The creation of a sand mandala. Monks will spend days, sometimes even weeks, painstakingly creating a large, breathtakingly intricate pattern on a platform using millions of grains of colored sand. The work requires immense focus, devotion, and artistry. The finished mandala is a masterpiece, a vibrant symbol of cosmic harmony and perfection. And then, after all this work, after the mandala is complete and has been displayed, a ceremony is held for its destruction. With a few symbolic sweeps of a brush, the monks dismantle the entire intricate creation, blending all the vibrant colors back into a single pile of grayish sand. This sand is then collected and poured into the nearest river or stream, a final offering, returning the elements to the world. The lesson is profound. The beauty and the value were in the act of creation, in the mindfulness and devotion of the process itself, not in the final product. The purpose of the mandala was never to be a permanent object to be possessed, but to be a beautiful teaching on the truth of impermanence and the wisdom of letting go. This is a wisdom we can discover for ourselves directly in our meditation practice. The breath is our first and most constant teacher of impermanence. Each in-breath has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It arises, sustains, and passes away. It is followed by an out-breath, which does the same. No two breaths are ever identical. Sounds appear in our awareness, without our bidding, linger for a moment, and then dissolve back into silence. An itch, a warmth, a pressure in the body, all of these sensations arise and pass away if we simply watch them without reacting. Most powerfully, we learn to watch our thoughts and emotions as transient events. When a feeling of anxiety arises, instead of becoming the anxious person, we can learn to observe it as a feeling of anxiety is present. We watch it as a weather pattern moving through the sky of our mind. We feel its energy, its texture, its story, and we watch as it, too, eventually changes and dissolves. This is an incredibly liberating skill. It frees us from identifying with our fleeting mental states. The thought is not me. The feeling is not me. It is just a temporary, impersonal event passing through awareness. To understand impermanence is not to become pessimistic or nihilistic. It is the exact opposite. It is the key to unlocking a profound and authentic joy. When you truly know that everything and everyone is impermanent, you begin to cherish the present moment with a new intensity. You love your friends and family more deeply because you know your time with them is precious and finite. You savor a simple moment of beauty, a sunset, a piece of music, the taste of fresh fruit because you know it cannot be held onto. The knowledge of death makes life more vibrant. The knowledge of endings makes the present moment sacred. This wisdom is also the source of our greatest resilience. When we are faced with pain, whether physical or emotional, the understanding of impermanence is our staunchest ally. In the midst of difficulty, we can find the strength to endure because we know, with a deep and unshakable certainty, this, too, shall pass. This knowledge prevents us from falling into the pit of despair, the belief that our current suffering will last forever. It allows us to hold our pain with a certain lightness, knowing that it is just another passing cloud. Ultimately, the wisdom of impermanence teaches us to live with open hands. We learn to hold our joys, our sorrows, our relationships, our successes, and our failures with a gentle and loving grace, appreciating them while they are here and letting them go when it is their time to leave. We cease our exhausting war with reality, and we learn to dance with the natural flow of life. As we become more established in this clear seeing of the constant change in all that we experience, a deeper question naturally begins to arise. If my body is always changing, if my feelings are always changing, if my thoughts are always changing, then who or what is this I that seems to be experiencing it all? If everything I can observe is impermanent, where is the permanent solid self I have always believed myself to be? This powerful inquiry leads us from the first mark of existence to the second, into the very heart of liberating wisdom, the truth of no self. We have walked through the landscape of our experience and seen with our own eyes the universal truth of impermanence. We have watched how everything we can perceive, from the farthest star to our own fleeting thoughts, is in a constant state of arising, changing, and passing away. This relentless flow, this ceaseless dance of existence, naturally brings us to the most intimate and profound question we can ask. Who is the dancer? If everything is changing, who is this I that seems to be the stable, continuous center of it all? This inquiry leads us to the heart of the Buddha's most unique and liberating teaching, the second great mark of existence, the truth of no self, or anatta. This is perhaps the most challenging and ultimately the most freeing insight on the entire path. It is not a teaching about our annihilation, but about our liberation from the prison of a limited identity. On a conventional, everyday level, of course we have a self. You have a name, a body, a history, a personality. You say, I am hungry, or I love this music. This conventional self is necessary to function in the world. The teaching of no self does not ask you to deny this practical reality. Instead, it invites you to become a gentle scientist of your own experience. It asks you to look deeply with the clear light of mindfulness to see if you can find anywhere within you a permanent, unchanging, independent core that you could rightly call your true self. When we undertake this investigation, we find something remarkable. We find that what we call self is not a solid entity, but a dynamic, ever-changing process. This process can be understood by looking at what are called the 5 aggregates, or the 5 heaps. These are the 5 components that come together to create the experience of a person. The first is form. This is our physical body or skin, bones, organs, and our entire material presence. We can ask ourselves, am I my body? But the body is constantly changing. It is aging, getting sick, healing, and made of elements that are not me. If you lose a limb in an accident, are you any less you? The body is impermanent and dependent on food, water, and air. So, the body cannot be this permanent, independent self. The second aggregate is feeling. This refers to the raw primal sensations that arise whenever our senses make contact with the world. These are categorized as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The warmth of the sun on your skin is a pleasant feeling. The pain of a headache is an unpleasant feeling. The sensation of your clothes against your shoulder might be a neutral feeling. Are you your feelings? Clearly not. Feelings are like the weather, changing from moment to moment, completely unreliable and fleeting. They cannot be the self. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It sees a certain shape and color and says, red car. It hears a sound and identifies it as a dog barking. It feels a sensation and labels it itchy. Are you your perceptions? Your perceptions are conditioned by your past experiences and your culture. They are not a stable, independent entity. They are just a cognitive function. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a vast category that includes all of our other mental activities. It is our thoughts, our beliefs, our opinions, our moods, our habits, our intentions, our likes and dislikes, our prejudices, and our dreams. This is the chattering monkey mind in its entirety. Are you your thoughts? A thought is the most ephemeral thing imaginable, appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as quickly. Our beliefs and opinions change with new information and experience. These mental formations are the most turbulent and unstable of all the aggregates. They cannot possibly be a permanent self. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. This is the fundamental quality of knowing or awareness that arises through our senses. There is seeing consciousness, which arises when an eye and a form come together. There is hearing consciousness, which arises when an ear and a sound come together, and so on for all the senses, including the mind itself as a sense organ that is aware of thoughts. But is this consciousness a unified, singular self? The teaching says no. Consciousness is not a monolithic background. It is a flickering, dependent process. It only arises when there is an object to be known. It is not independent, and it too is in a state of constant flux. Therefore, even this basic awareness cannot be the permanent self we are looking for. After examining all 5 components that make up our entire experience, we are left with a stunning conclusion. There is no one in charge. There is no little person inside. No central CEO pulling the levers. The self we believe in so strongly is a combination of these 5 changing processes, a convenient name we give to the flow, but it has no independent, solid existence of its own. There is a famous ancient text called The Questions of King Milinda, which contains a brilliant illustration of this point. The Greek King Milinda, a sharp intellectual, sought out the Buddhist sage Nagasena to debate this very teaching. Nagasena arrived, and the king asked for his name. Nagasena replied that his brothers called him Nagasena, but it was only a designation, a name, because in ultimate reality, no permanent person could be found. The king was incredulous. He challenged Nagasena, using the king's own magnificent chariot as an example. Pointing to it, the king asked, "Is the pole of the chariot the chariot?" "No, Your Majesty," Nagasena replied. "Are the wheels the chariot? Is the axle the chariot? Are the reins the chariot?" To each question, Nagasena answered no. The king was triumphant, believing he had trapped the sage in a contradiction. But then Nagasena gently turned the question back to the king. "Your Majesty, you say you arrived in a chariot, but if the pole is not the chariot, and the wheels are not the chariot, and the axle is not the chariot, then where is this chariot?" The king, caught in his own logic, had a moment of insight. He replied, "Venerable Sir, it is in dependence on the pole, the axle, the wheels, the frame, and the reins that there takes place this designation, this convenient term, this name, chariot." Nagasena smiled. "Exactly so, Your Majesty. And just so, it is independence on the 5 aggregates of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness that there takes place this designation, Nagasena. Understanding this is not a cause for fear. It is the doorway to ultimate freedom. The belief in a solid, separate self, the egos, the source of almost all our mental suffering. This ego is a full-time job. It is constantly anxious. What do people think of me? Will I be successful? How do I look? Am I smart enough? It is constantly comparing itself to others, leading to jealousy, pride, and insecurity. It creates the fundamental, illusory barrier between me and you, the root of all conflict, loneliness, and selfishness. To see through this illusion is to put down the heaviest burden you have ever carried, a burden so heavy you may not have even realized you were carrying it. The exhausting need to protect, defend, and enhance this imaginary self simply falls away. This does not mean you cease to exist. It means you exist in a far more beautiful and interconnected way than you ever imagined. When the hard shell of the I softens and dissolves, the barrier between self and other becomes porous. True empathy arises naturally because you see that another person's suffering is not fundamentally separate from your own. We are all expressions of the same interdependent process of life. It is a shift from seeing yourself as a lonely, isolated noun to experiencing yourself as a connected, flowing verb. With this radical new understanding of what a person is not a fixed entity, but a flowing process, we can now look again at our actions in the world. If there is no permanent self, then who performs an action and who reaps its results? This leads us to a more subtle and profound understanding of the natural law of cause and effect, the law of karma. We have just journeyed through the 2 most profound and challenging insights of the path: the truth that all things are impermanent, and the truth that within this flow of change, there is no fixed, independent self. A skeptical mind might hear this and ask a very reasonable question. If there is no permanent me, then what is the point of moral action? Who is it that acts? And if no one is there, who is it that experiences the results of those actions? This is where we encounter the elegant and deeply misunderstood law of karma. This teaching, when properly understood, fits perfectly with the truths of impermanence and no self, and it transforms the path from a philosophical idea into a dynamic and empowering way of life. In the popular imagination, the word karma has been twisted to mean something like fate, destiny, or a kind of cosmic revenge. We hear people say, "He had it coming, it was his karma," as if some external judge were balancing the books of the universe. The Buddha's teaching on karma is the exact opposite of this. It is not a doctrine of fatalism, it is the ultimate doctrine of free will and personal responsibility. It is not a system of divine punishment, but an impersonal, natural law of cause and effect, as reliable and observable as the law of gravity. If you plant an acorn, an oak tree will grow, not a rose bush. This is not a reward or punishment. It is the natural unfolding of a cause into its corresponding effect. The most crucial point in this teaching is that karma is not the act itself, but the intention behind the act. The Buddha was explicit about this. He said, "It is intention that I call karma. Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind." This shifts the entire focus of our ethical life from the outside to the inside. The moral quality of an action is determined by the quality of the volition that gives rise to it. Imagine two people giving $1,000 to a charity. The first person does it with the intention of impressing their friends and getting a plaque with their name on it. The second person gives the same amount anonymously, motivated by a pure and simple wish to relieve the suffering of others. The external action is identical, but the intention, the inner action, is worlds apart, and therefore, the karmic seed that is planted is entirely different. One seed is rooted in ego and attachment. The other is rooted in compassion and letting go. A helpful way to visualize how karma works is to think of yourself as a farmer and your mind as a field. Every moment of your life, you are planting seeds in this field. Every action you take, every word you speak, and every thought you think is a seed. The law of karma is simply the law of agriculture. You reap what you sow. If you plant seeds of anger, hatred, and greed, be speaking harsh words, acting selfishly, or indulging in hateful thoughts, you are planting the seeds of bitter fruit. The natural result of these actions is a life of conflict, isolation, and inner turmoil. If, on the other hand, you consciously choose to plant seeds of kindness, generosity, and wisdom, be offering a helping hand, speaking words of encouragement, or cultivating a compassionate heart, you are planting the seeds for sweet fruit. The natural result of these actions is a life of friendship, trust, and a deep sense of inner peace. This understanding completely reframes our relationship to our past, present, and future. We are the heirs of our past actions. The circumstances of our present life, our temperament, our opportunities, our challenges are the ripening of the countless seeds we have planted in the past. This is not to be seen as a punishment, but simply as the field we have inherited. We must accept it with wisdom and without blame. But, and this is the most empowering part of the teaching, we are not prisoners of our past. In this very moment, we are the absolute creators of our future. We are the farmer, standing in the field, holding the seeds in our hands. We have the power, right now, to decide which seeds to plant. We can choose to stop sowing the bitter seeds of our habitual reactions. We can begin, right here, to cultivate a beautiful garden by planting the wholesome seeds of conscious, kind, and wise intentions. This perspective eliminates all sense of victimhood. Our happiness and our suffering are not random, nor are they handed to us by an external force. They are the direct result of our own choices. But how does this fit with the truth of no self? If there is no permanent me to perform the action, who receives the result? The answer is that it is not a who that connects the cause and the effect, but a what. It is the continuity of the process, the unbroken stream of consciousness. Imagine lighting one candle from the flame of another. The flame on the second candle is not the same flame as the one on the first, but it is not completely different either. There is a clear causal connection, a transference of energy. The flame on the second candle is a direct result of the flame on the first, even though no thing has passed between them. In the same way, the stream of consciousness, this flow of the five aggregates, carries the imprint of an intentional action from one moment to the next. The action creates a potential, a disposition, a tendency in the mind stream, which will ripen into an experience when the conditions are right. There is no need for a permanent soul to act as a carrier for karma, just as there is no need for a thing to pass between the candles. The continuity of the causal process is enough. So, karma is the law that gives structure and meaning to a selfless and ever-changing universe. It shows us that our lives are not a chaotic accident, It reveals a universe that is morally intelligible, where our choices have a profound and inescapable significance. It is not a rigid, deterministic system. The results of our past actions can be mitigated or amplified by our present choices. A person who has planted many negative seeds in the past can, through diligent practice of kindness and wisdom in the present, create a more fertile soil, softening the impact of the old negative seeds and ensuring a better harvest in the future. This teaching places our destiny firmly in our own hands. We are not being watched or judged, but we are participating in a natural law of immense elegance and power. We are the architects of our own reality. By taking responsibility for our intentions, we transform our lives from a passive experience into a creative act. We become a conscious gardener, cultivating a life of beauty, peace, and freedom, not just for ourselves, but for all the beings we share this world with. This is an incredible gift and an awesome responsibility. As we take up this responsibility, however, we quickly discover that our good intentions are not always enough. Our minds are full of powerful, long-standing habits and inner obstacles that can hijack our best intentions and pull us back into old patterns of suffering. To walk this path effectively, we must become skilled at recognizing and working with these inner saboteurs. And so, our journey now takes us into a practical exploration of these common obstacles, the 5 great hindrances to peace. As we commit ourselves to walking this path, taking up the profound responsibility for our own karma, we are filled with a sincere intention to cultivate peace and wisdom. We sit down, ready to practice, and we quickly discover that the inner world is not a quiet sanctuary. It is a wild and often unruly place, filled with powerful currents that pull us away from our best intentions. These powerful mental and emotional forces are known as the 5 hindrances. They are the primary obstacles that cloud the mind, obscure its natural clarity, and prevent us from finding the stillness we seek. They are not personal failings, but universal patterns of the human mind. Learning to recognize them, understand them, and skillfully work with them is an essential part of the journey. The Buddha used a powerful set of similes to describe the state of a mind that is free from these hindrances. He said, "It is like a person who was once in debt and is now debt-free, a person who was sick and is now restored to health, a person who was in prison and has been released, a person who was a slave and is now liberated, and a person who was lost on a dangerous journey and has now arrived safely home." This is the freedom and joy that awaits us when we learn to work with these 5 challenging visitors in the mind. The first hindrance is sensual desire. This is the mind's powerful pull towards any kind of pleasant experience through the 5 senses. It is the craving for a delicious taste, a beautiful sight, an enchanting piece of music, a pleasant smell, or a comfortable physical sensation. When we are meditating, this hindrance arises as a fantasy, a daydream about something we would rather be experiencing than the simple reality of the present moment. We might be lost in planning a gourmet meal, replaying a pleasant memory, or fantasizing about a future vacation. This is the mind of the person in debt. It operates from a sense of lack, believing that happiness is something to be acquired from the outside. It feels a debt of dissatisfaction that it believes can only be paid by consuming the next pleasant experience. But like any financial debt, the pleasure is fleeting, and the underlying sense of lack, the interest, only continues to grow. The primary antidote to this feverish wanting is to mindfully contemplate the law of impermanence. We look clearly at the object of our desire and recognize that it is transient. The delicious food will be gone in a few moments. The beautiful sunset will fade. By seeing its changing nature, the desperate grip of our clinging begins to loosen. The second hindrance is ill will, or aversion. This is the opposite of desire. It is the energy of pushing away, resisting, and rejecting our present experience. It manifests as a wide spectrum of feelings, from violent rage and hatred at one end, to subtle irritation, resentment, impatience, and judgment at the other. It is the mind that is at war with reality, constantly finding fault with ourselves, with others, and with our circumstances. This is the mind of the person who is sick. When we are filled with ill will, our mind is in a state of feverish pain. We cannot think clearly, we cannot rest, and we spread our misery to others. The direct medicine for this sickness is the practice of loving kindness. When aversion towards a person arises, we deliberately meet it with phrases of goodwill. When we feel frustration with a situation, we try to cultivate patience. When we feel harsh judgment towards ourselves, we offer a dose of self-compassion. Loving kindness is the cool, soothing balm that heals the fever of an angry heart. The third hindrance is sloth and torpor. This is not simple physical tiredness, but a deep mental heaviness. It is a state of dullness, lethargy, sluggishness, and fogginess. The mind feels heavy as lead, unwilling to make an effort. It is a kind of mental shutdown, an escape into a half-conscious state of numbness. This is the mind of the person in prison. It is confined in a dark cell of its own making, unable to move with freedom or clarity. It is trapped. To break out of this prison, we must arouse energy. We can work with the body by straightening our posture, standing up, or doing a period of walking meditation. We can work with the mind by turning our attention to an inspiring topic, reflecting on the great gift of our life, or visualizing a bright and radiant light filling our entire body and mind. It is about intentionally reigniting our interest and engagement with the present moment. The fourth hindrance is restlessness and worry. This is the agitated, monkey mind in its most frantic state. The mind simply cannot settle down. It is like a fly trapped in a jar, buzzing from one thought to another, unable to rest. This restlessness is often accompanied by its close cousin, worry. We worry about the future, or we are filled with remorse and anxiety about something we did or said in the past. This is the mind of a slave. We are not our own master. Our attention is enslaved to the relentless currents of nervous energy, dragged from one anxious thought to the next, without our consent. The primary antidote to this agitated state is the cultivation of calm. We consciously bring our attention back to the steady, stable rhythm of the breath. The breath is our anchor in the storm of restlessness. By returning to it again and again, we give the enslaved mind a moment of profound rest, a taste of what it is like to be free from its own frantic energy. The fifth and final hindrance is skeptical doubt. This is not the healthy, intelligent questioning that is a vital part of this path. This is a corrosive, cynical, and unproductive state of mind that undermines our confidence and paralyzes our effort. It is the whispering voice that says, "This will never work for me. I'm not capable of this. Maybe this whole teaching is a waste of time. What's the point?" It is a state of indecisive wavering that prevents us from ever fully committing to the practice. This is the mind of the traveler lost in a vast and dangerous desert, not knowing which way to go. You are paralyzed by uncertainty. You wander in circles, depleting your precious energy and making no progress towards safety. The antidote here is to cultivate a wise confidence. We can do this by clarifying our own deepest intention for practicing. We can reflect on the teachings and see how they make logical sense. We can borrow faith from the example of those who have walked this path successfully before us. The practical strategy is to make a resolution to suspend the doubt for the duration of the practice. We choose a direction, and we commit to walking, deciding to find out for ourselves if the path leads where it promises. Learning to work with these 5 hindrances is a crucial skill. The first and most important step is always mindful recognition. We simply learn to notice, without judgment, this is sensual desire, or this is ill will. By naming the visitor, we separate ourselves from it. We are no longer lost in anger. We are the one who is aware of anger. This act alone robs the hindrance of much of its power. We learn to see them not as enemies to be destroyed, but as wise messengers. They teach us about our own deepest patterns. They show us where we are still clinging, where our hearts are still closed, and where our energy is out of balance. By meeting them with mindfulness and applying the appropriate antidote with gentle persistence, we gradually purify the mind. We clear away the clouds, allowing the natural radiance of our own awareness to shine through. As the mind becomes more consistently clear and stable, it gains the capacity to see even more deeply into the nature of reality, beyond these gross obstacles, to the subtle and profound truth of the way things truly are. This leads us to the insight of emptiness. We have journeyed far into the landscape of the mind. We have seen that all our experiences are impermanent, rising and falling like waves on the ocean. We have looked for the solid, unchanging self at the center of these waves and found that it, too, is an illusion, a process, rather than a thing. Now, we arrive at the deepest and most subtle insight of this path, an understanding that underpins all the others. It is the truth of emptiness. This word can sound frightening or nihilistic, as if it points to a cold, meaningless void. But its true meaning is the very opposite. It does not point to nothingness, but to a reality of profound and radical interconnectedness. It is the key that unlocks ultimate freedom. To understand emptiness, let us consider a simple object, like a teacup. We look at it, and our mind labels it cup. It seems to be a solid, real, independent object. But let us investigate. What is this cup really? A cup cannot exist by itself. For this cup to be here, there must first be clay. So, the clay is a part of the cup. The clay had to be mixed with water to become pliable. So the water is in the cup. A potter had to shape the clay with their hands and their skill. So the potter is in the cup. The potter needed food to have the energy to work. So the farmer who grew the food, the sun, the rain, and the earth are all here in this cup. The cup had to be fired in a kiln. So the fire, the fuel, and the builder of the kiln are all present. The idea of the cup, passed down through generations, is here. The entire universe, in a very real sense, has conspired to bring this simple cup into being. When we look deeply, we see that the cup is full of all these non-cup elements. It is full of the entire cosmos. So, what is it empty of? It is empty of one thing, and one thing only, a separate, independent, stand-alone existence. It has no intrinsic, isolated self. Its existence is entirely dependent on everything else. This is the meaning of emptiness. It does not mean non-existence. It means empty of a separate self. This universal law of interconnectedness is known as dependent origination. The principle is simple and profound. This is because that is. This is not because that is not. This arises because that arises. This ceases because that ceases. Nothing exists in a vacuum. everything in the universe arises in dependence on other factors. A flower cannot exist without the non-flower elements of sunlight, soil, seed, and rain. A thought cannot exist without the mind that thinks it. Our very sense of self depends on there being an other from which to distinguish ourselves. The world is not a collection of separate, billiard ball-like objects. It is a single, seamless, flowing web of causes and conditions where every single thread is intimately connected to every other thread. There is a beautiful and ancient image from the Mahayana scriptures that captures this reality perfectly. The allegory of Indra's net. Imagine a vast, cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single intersection of the net's threads, there hangs a single, perfectly polished, multifaceted jewel. The net is structured in such a way that if you look closely at the surface of any one jewel, you will see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire, infinite net. And within each of those reflections, you will see the reflections of all the other jewels, and so on, forever. This is a metaphor for the universe. Each of us, each particle of dust, each star, is one of these jewels. Our existence is not separate, but is a perfect reflection of the whole. Everything is contained within everything else. Your joy, your sorrow, your very being is reflected in me, and mine is reflected in you. To see the world this way is to dissolve the illusion of separation that is the root cause of so much of our suffering, our loneliness, and our conflict. When we truly begin to understand this, our capacity for compassion becomes boundless. Compassion ceases to be a moralistic duty, a good thing we should do. It becomes the most natural and logical response to seeing the world as it truly is. How can I harm you when I see that you are a reflection of me? How can I act purely for my own selfish benefit when I understand that my well-being is completely interwoven with the well-being of the entire net? The pain of another is no longer truly other. Their joy is no longer separate from my own. The rigid distinction between self and other, which is the foundation of fear and hatred, begins to soften and melt away. We realize that love for another is simply the universe recognizing and loving itself. Furthermore, this insight into emptiness is the ultimate ground of freedom. If things had a fixed, permanent, independent nature, then nothing could ever change. A person defined by anger would be trapped in anger forever. A world filled with injustice would be condemned to be that way eternally. But because all things are empty of a fixed, inherent self, they are open, malleable, and full of limitless potential. Because you are empty of a permanent, unchanging self, you are not defined by your past. You are not a prisoner of your old habits, your traumas, or the labels that you or others have placed upon you. In every moment, you have the radical freedom to change, to learn, to grow, and to choose a new way of being. Emptiness is not a void. It is the open space of pure possibility in which the dance of life can unfold. It is the freedom from all fixed views, all rigid identities, and all limiting concepts. We have now journeyed from the observable truth of impermanence to the deconstruction of the personal self, and finally to this profound vision of emptiness and universal interconnectedness. We have seen that the separate self is an illusion, and that our true nature is one with the entire web of existence. This is the pinnacle of wisdom on the path. But this wisdom is not meant to be kept as an abstract idea or a beautiful trophy for the intellect. Its entire purpose is to be lived, to be embodied, to be brought down from the mountain peak of insight into the marketplace of our daily lives. The final challenge and the ultimate purpose of our journey is to learn how to carry this sense of freedom and boundless connection with us in our ordinary world. How do we find this peace when we are stuck in traffic? How do we feel this compassion when we are dealing with a difficult colleague? How do we live from this wisdom in the heart of a busy, modern city? This is where the path now leads us, to the integration of this profound vision into our practical, everyday reality. We have journeyed to the highest peaks of wisdom, exploring the profound truths of impermanence, no self, and the interconnected emptiness of all reality. It is a breathtaking view, but now we must descend from the mountain and learn to walk in the valley of our everyday lives. For many of us, that valley is a modern metropolis, a chaotic landscape of deadlines and traffic jams, of blinking smartphone notifications and relentless demands on our attention. A natural thought arises: this wisdom is beautiful, but my life is not a tranquil monastery. How can I possibly find peace here? This is the most practical and important question of all. The answer is that the goal is not to retreat from the world to find peace. The goal is to find peace right in the middle of the world. The true monastery is not a place you go to. It is a quality of mind you cultivate, right where you are. The busy, noisy, and often stressful world is not an obstacle to your practice. It is your practice. A quiet retreat center is like a sterile laboratoria, perfect place to learn the principles. But the city, the office, the family home, this is the real world where the experiment is tested. It is only when our patience is challenged by a difficult colleague that we know if we have truly cultivated patience. It is only when our mindfulness is assaulted by 1,000 distractions that we know if our focus is strong. Every irritation, every interruption, every moment of frustration is not a failure of our practice. It is an invitation to practice. The world becomes our teacher, our sparring partner, our monastery. The first step is to redefine what practice means. We often think it means sitting on a cushion for 30 minutes every morning. While formal sitting is immensely valuable, if that is the only time we are mindful, we are missing the other 23.5 hours of the day. The real art is to weave practice into the fabric of our ordinary lives, especially into the moments we usually discard as worthless. Our day is full of little gaps, moments of dead time that we typically fill with mindless scrolling on our phones. These gaps are golden opportunities. When you are standing in line for your morning coffee, instead of checking your email, feel the sensation of your feet on the floor. Take 3 conscious breaths. Notice the smells and sounds of the cafe without getting lost in a story about them. When you are stuck in traffic, instead of tightening with anger, use the red light as a bell of mindfulness. Turn off the radio. Feel your hands on the steering wheel. Notice the tension in your jaw and shoulders and breathe into it. When you are walking from your car to your office door, feel the sensation of each footstep on the pavement. These are micro practices. They may seem small, but like single drops of rain, they accumulate and eventually saturate our lives with a quality of presence. Our relationships, too, become a central part of our practice. Often, our greatest suffering arises from our interactions with others. This means our relationships are also our greatest opportunity for growth. That colleague who constantly irritates you, they are your personal teacher of patience. Can you listen to them without immediately formulating a defense? Can you notice the feeling of aversion rising in your own body and just allow it to be there without acting on it? Can you, for a moment, consider that their difficult behavior comes from their own unhappiness and confusion? You don't have to become their best friend, but you can use the interaction to practice equanimity and compassion. Your family home, with its deep emotional currents and habitual triggers, becomes a laboratory for loving kindness. Can you give your partner or your child the profound gift of your full, undivided attention, even for just 5 minutes? When a flash of anger ignites, can you create a tiny space with a single breath? A space that allows you to choose a kinder response rather than falling into an old, painful pattern. Another powerful technique is to create intentional sacred pauses throughout your day. The modern workday is often a relentless sprint from one task to the next. We need to build in moments to consciously break this momentum of stress. You might set a silent, recurring alarm on your phone for 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. When it vibrates, you stop whatever you are doing. You close your eyes. You take 5 deep, mindful breaths. You ask, what is the state of my mind right now? What is the state of my body? It is a simple reset, a moment to come up for air. You can also use the transitions between activities. Before you dial into the next video call or start on a new project, take just 60 seconds. Sit quietly, let go of the mental residue from the last task, and set a clear, positive intention for the task you are about to begin. This prevents the stress of one activity from bleeding into and contaminating the next. Let me tell you a modern story. There was a CEO named Sarah, the head of a fast-growing tech company. From the outside, she was incredibly successful. On the inside, she was burned out, anxious, and constantly reactive. Her life was a blur of meetings, emails, and sleepless nights. She began working with a meditation teacher, and she told him, "I don't have time for this. I can't go to a monastery." The teacher smiled and said, "You don't have to. Your office is your monastery. The boardroom is your meditation hall." He gave her these simple instructions. Before every single meeting, she was to sit in her chair for just 1 minute, close her eyes, and feel the sensation of her breath. During tense negotiations, she was taught to bring her attention to the feeling of her feet on the floor, to ground herself. When listening to an employee's concerns, her practice was simply to listen, to resist the urge to interrupt and solve the problem, and to just hear them fully. At first, it felt strange, but slowly, things began to shift. By taking those tiny pauses, she became less reactive. She started making clearer decisions, not driven by anxiety, but by a sense of calm clarity. Her team felt heard and respected, and the entire culture of her company began to change. She was still a CEO in a high-pressure world, but she was no longer a victim of it. She had found the eye of the storm within herself. Her success was no longer measured just by profits, but by a newfound sense of inner balance. This is the heart of the practice in the modern world. A physical monastery provides external silence to help you find your inner silence. But if your mind is a raging storm, even the quietest place on earth will feel like a torture chamber. Conversely, if you can cultivate a space of inner quiet and awareness, you can be at peace even in the middle of a noisy, chaotic city. The real work is not about changing our life circumstances to match some idealized image of a spiritual life. It is about changing the quality of our mind so that we can meet any circumstance with wisdom, compassion, and peace. The true monastery is not made of stone walls and quiet cloisters. It is built in the spaciousness of your own mindful awareness. As we learn to bring this practice into our daily actions and our environment, we must now turn to one of the most powerful and pervasive forces that shapes our modern world: our relationship with consumer culture. The constant pressure of materialism, the relentless pursuit of more, is a primary source of our anxiety and dissatisfaction. We must now explore how this ancient wisdom can guide us to redefine our notion of wealth and to find a true and lasting prosperity that has nothing to do with what we own. We have learned to bring our practice into the bustling monastery of our daily lives, finding moments of peace amidst the chaos. Now, we must turn our attention to one of the most powerful and pervasive forces shaping that chaos: the modern world's relentless obsession with materialism. From the moment we are born, we are immersed in a culture that delivers one single, hypnotic message. Happiness is something you can buy. The good life is defined by what we own: the right car, the right house, the right clothes, the latest phone. Our value as human beings is subtly but constantly equated with our net worth. This teaching asks us to stop, to question this fundamental assumption, and to explore a radically different definition of wealth. One that leads not to a fleeting thrill, but to a deep and unshakable prosperity of the heart. The endless pursuit of material possessions is a perfect modern illustration of what the Buddha called tanha, the insatiable thirst. It is the second noble truth playing out on a global scale. Our consumer culture is a finely tuned engine designed to create and amplify this thirst. It works by creating a constant sense of lack, a feeling that we are incomplete and that the missing piece can be found in the next purchase. But this is a game that can never be won. It is like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. The momentary relief is quickly followed by an even more intense craving. The thrill of the new car fades. The excitement of the latest gadget is swiftly replaced by the desire for the next, upgraded model. We find ourselves on a hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster simply to maintain the same level of satisfaction, a state of perpetual striving that is the very essence of suffering. The path of wisdom does not ask us to renounce all possessions and live a life of stark poverty. It simply asks us to see with clarity that material things, being impermanent and external to us, can never provide a stable or lasting happiness. It then offers a profound alternative. It invites us to shift our focus from accumulating external things to cultivating internal treasures. The Buddha spoke of a different kind of wealth, the 7 treasures of the noble ones. These are inner qualities that, unlike material possessions, cannot be stolen, cannot be lost in a market crash, and only increase in value the more you use them. The first treasure is faith, or confidence. This is not blind belief, but a deep, trusting confidence in the path of wisdom and compassion, in the truth of cause and effect, and in our own innate potential to awaken. It is the bedrock of our practice. The second treasure is ethical conduct. This is the wealth of a clear conscience, the inner richness that comes from living a life of harmlessness, honesty, and integrity. There is a profound self-respect and peace of mind that comes from knowing you are not causing harm, a peace that no amount of money can buy. The next 2 treasures are moral shame and moral dread. These terms may sound negative, but they refer to a highly refined inner sensitivity. Moral shame is a healthy sense of personal honor, an internal compass that feels a natural aversion to unskillful actions. Moral dread is a wise fear of the consequences of harmful actions, born not of a belief in external punishment, but from a clear understanding of the law of karma. Together, these 2 treasures are the guardians of our integrity. The 5th treasure is learning, the wealth of a mind that is filled with the wisdom of the teachings that lead to freedom. The 6th treasure is generosity, the wealth of an open heart, the joy that arises from the act of giving and letting go. And the 7th and supreme treasure is wisdom itself, the direct, penetrating insight into the nature of reality that cuts the root of all suffering. This is the ultimate, indestructible wealth. How then do we begin to cultivate these true treasures? We begin with the practices of contentment and gratitude. Contentment is the radical and countercultural act of being satisfied with what we already have. It is not complacency or a lack of desire to improve. It is simply the conscious choice to step off the hedonic treadmill. It is the practice of finding richness in simplicity, of recognizing that our basic needs are met, and that the constant striving for more is a source of stress, not joy. We can actively practice this by taking stock of our lives and appreciating what is already here. This leads directly to the practice of gratitude. Instead of our mind's habitual tendency to focus on what is missing, we intentionally redirect it to what is present. We take a moment to be grateful for our body, however imperfect it may be. We feel gratitude for our friends, for a roof over our head, for the food we are about to eat, for the simple, miraculous fact that we are alive and breathing in this moment. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to the poison of consumerism, for it trains the mind to see abundance where it once saw only lack. The greatest of all practices for overcoming materialism and cultivating true wealth is the practice of generosity, or dana. In the story of the Buddha's chief lay disciple, a man named Anathapindika, we see this principle in action. He was one of the wealthiest merchants in all of India, renowned for his kindness and his support of the poor. He famously purchased a beautiful park for the Buddha and the community of monks to use as a monastery, paying for it by covering the entire ground with gold coins. Later in his life, due to various misfortunes, he lost a significant portion of his material wealth. From a worldly perspective, this was a tragedy, but Anathapindika, through the wisdom of the teachings, had come to understand a deeper truth. He realized that his real, unfading wealth was not the gold he had once possessed, but the immense merit and boundless joy he had accumulated through his acts of giving. The happiness derived from his generosity was a treasure that no economic downturn could ever take from him. This is the beautiful paradox of generosity. The logic of materialism tells us that to become richer, we must accumulate more. The law of karma tells us that to become richer, we must give more away. When we cling to our possessions, our time, and our energy, we are operating from a mindset of scarcity and fear. Our world shrinks, and our heart constricts. But when we give freely, without expecting anything in return, we are acting from a place of abundance. The very act of giving creates the feeling that we have enough to share. It breaks the ego's tight-fisted grip of me and mine. The joy that arises from a spontaneous act of generosity, whether it is giving your time to a friend in need, donating to a cause you believe in, or simply offering a kind word to a strangeris, a taste of true wealth, a richness of the heart that is immediate, pure, and boundless. By redefining our understanding of wealth, we shift the entire orientation of our lives. We move from a frantic, self-centered pursuit of external accumulation to a calm, dignified, and open-hearted cultivation of our inner world. We discover a prosperity that is not dependent on the whims of the economy or the opinions of others. It is a stable, portable, and deeply satisfying richness that we carry within us wherever we go. As we find this inner wealth and peace for ourselves, a natural evolution occurs. A heart that is truly at peace and feels genuinely abundant does not close itself off from the world. It naturally overflows with a desire to share its peace and its resources with all beings. The journey ceases to be solely about our own liberation. And this leads us to the final, culminating vision of the path, the great and compassionate ideal of the Bodhisattva. We have journeyed far together through the landscapes of our own minds, exploring the nature of our suffering and seeking the path to its cessation. We have spoken of mindfulness, of compassion, of letting go, and of understanding the profound truths of impermanence and non-self. And now, we arrive at the culmination of this path, a word that is often heard yet frequently misunderstood. A word that might conjure images of a distant, ethereal paradise, a reward waiting only after our final breath. That word is nirvana. But what if nirvana was not a place we go to, but a state we arrive at? What if it was not a promise for the future, but a possibility for the present? What if peace was not something to be found, but something to be realized, right here and right now? To understand nirvana, we must first let go of our preconceived notions of heaven or paradise. The wisdom of the Buddha does not point to a location, but to a quality of mind. The word nirvana, from the ancient Sanskrit, literally means to extinguish or to blow out. This is perhaps the most powerful and direct metaphor we can use. Imagine a flame. It flickers, it dances, it consumes, and it is dependent on fuel to continue its existence. Our suffering, our stress, our relentless anxiety is very much like this flame. And it too has its fuel. The Buddha identified 3 primary sources of fuel that keep the fires of our discontent burning. These are often called the 3 poisons, or the 3 fires: greed, hatred, and delusion. The first fire is greed, or craving. It is the insatiable thirst for more possessions, more validation, more pleasure, more security. It is the voice in our head that says, if only I had that new car, that promotion, that perfect relationship, then I would be happy. It is a fire that feeds on the future, always consuming the present moment in its hunger for what is next. It creates a constant, low-level hum of dissatisfaction, a feeling that what we have is never quite enough. We run on a treadmill of desire, and the faster we run, the more fuel we burn, and the more intense the heat of our own wanting becomes. We are perpetually leaning forward, chasing a horizon that recedes as we approach it, never truly standing still, never truly at peace in the place we already are. The second fire is hatred or aversion. It is the forceful pushing away of what we do not want. It is the anger that flares in traffic, the resentment we hold against those who have wronged us, the frustration with our own perceived failings, the irritation at life's inevitable inconveniences. This fire is hot, volatile, and destructive. It burns with the fuel of blame, of judgment, and of resistance to reality. When we are in the grip of aversion, our world shrinks. Our muscles tighten, our breath becomes shallow, our mind becomes a courtroom where we are constantly prosecuting the world, others, and ourselves for not meeting our expectations. This fire of hatred not only harms others through our actions and words, but it scorrows our own inner landscape first, leaving behind the ash of bitterness and isolation. The third, and most fundamental fire, is delusion or ignorance. This is not a lack of intelligence or information. It is a fundamental misperception of reality. It is the smoke that rises from the other 2 fires, clouding our vision. Delusion is the belief in a solid, separate, permanent self that is at the odds with the world. It is the ignorance of impermanence, leading us to cling to things that are destined to change. It is the ignorance of interconnectedness, making us feel separate and alone. This fire is fueled by our stories, our unexamined beliefs, our conditioned narratives about who we are and how the world should be. It is the fog that prevents us from seeing things as they truly are, keeping us trapped in a cycle of reacting to our own projections, rather than responding to reality itself. Nirvana, then, is the extinguishing of these 3 fires. It is the end of suffering because it is the removal of its fuel. And this brings us to a crucial question. When you extinguish a candle flame, where does the flame go? Does it travel north, south, east, or west? The question itself is flawed. The flame does not go anywhere. It simply ceases to be, because the conditions that supported its existence, the wax, the wick, the oxygen air, no longer aligned. In the same way, the Buddha taught that asking where suffering goes in nirvana is the wrong question. Suffering, like the flame, ceases to be because its fuel greed, hatred, and delusion has been exhausted. This extinguishing is not an act of violence or suppression. We do not put out the fires by force. We put them out by wisely and gently removing their fuel. And every tool we have discussed on this journey is a tool for removing that fuel. When the fire of greed arises, mindfulness allows us to see it simply as a sensation, a thought, an energy in the body, rather than a command we must obey. We observe the wanting without feeding it, and in that space of non-reaction, the fire subsides for lack of fuel. When the fire of anger flares, compassion and understanding are the water that cools the flames. We see the suffering in ourselves and in the other person, and we recognize that lashing out will only add more fuel to the blaze. When the smoke of delusion clouds our mind, the practice of insight, of looking deeply into the nature of impermanence and non-self, clears the air. We see that the scary monster we were fighting was only a shadow cast by our own mind. So what does this state of nirvana feel like? It is crucial to understand that it is not a state of blankness, apathy, or emotional emptiness. It is not the annihilation of the self, but the annihilation of the illusion of a separate self. The result is not a void, but a profound fullness. It is characterized by supreme peace, an unshakable serenity that is not dependent on external conditions. Imagine being in the eye of a hurricane. The winds may howl around you. The world may be in turmoil, but at the very center, there is a profound calm. This is the peace of nirvana. It is a peace that comes from the cessation of internal conflict, the end of the war within. Furthermore, it is a state of pristine clarity and wisdom. With the smoke of delusion gone, we see reality with an unfiltered, luminous awareness. We see the intricate web of causes and conditions that governs all of existence. We see the inherent beauty and preciousness of each moment, without the distortion of our cravings and aversions. This clarity is not just intellectual, it is a deep, intuitive knowing that permeates our entire being. And finally, this state is suffused with boundless compassion and a deep, abiding joy or bliss. When the fires of self-centered craving and hatred are extinguished, the heart naturally opens. Our focus shifts from me and mine to a sense of profound connection with all life. We feel the suffering of others as our own, not as a burden, but as a call to compassionate action. And the bliss of nirvana is not the fleeting, excitable happiness that comes from getting what we want. It is a subtle, stable, and deeply nourishing well-being that arises from being utterly free. It is the simple joy of being untangled from the desperate need for things to be different than they are. The most transformative aspect of this teaching is that nirvana is not a distant goal. It is accessible, in fragments and in moments, right here and now. Every time you consciously choose to take a breath, instead of reacting in anger, you are tasting nirvana. Every time you notice a desire arise and simply let it pass without grasping, you are experiencing a moment of nirvana. Every time you rest in the present moment, fully aware, without the pull of the past or the push toward the future, you are touching the shore of nirvana. It is not an all-or-nothing proposition. It is a gradual cooling of the inner fires. Each mindful breath, each moment of letting go, is like a drop of water on the embers. At first, it may seem insignificant, but with continued practice, the drops become a stream, then a river, dousing the flames and allowing a cool, clear peace to emerge. The path is simply the cultivation of these moments. The goal is not to arrive at a different place, but to inhabit this place, this moment, in a different way. It is to realize that the freedom you seek is not outside of you. It is in the very nature of your own aware, untroubled mind. The fires may seem powerful, but they are not infinite. They depend entirely on the fuel you provide. The invitation of this path is to simply, gently, and wisely stop feeding the flames. We began this journey together, perhaps from a place of quiet desperation, in the stillness of a long and sleepless night. We started with the universal human experience of feeling overwhelmed, adrift in the currents of a demanding world. From that starting point, we chose not to turn away from our discomfort, but to turn towards it with courage and with curiosity. We have walked a path that led us directly into the heart of our own suffering, not to dwell in it, but to understand it. We learned to see it not as a personal failing, but as a fundamental condition of an unexamined life. Along the way, we lit a small torch, the torch of mindfulness, and with it, we began to illuminate the dark corners of our own mind. We saw the fleeting nature of all things, the truth of impermanence, which taught us the futility of clinging. We looked for a solid, unchanging self at the center of our experience, and found instead a beautiful, flowing process, the truth of non-self, which taught us the freedom of letting go. We learned to sit with the fire of our anger and transform its heat into the warmth of compassion. We learned to observe the seeds of sorrow, and instead of watering them with our attention, we learned to cultivate the gardens of loving kindness and joy within. We have practiced moving from a life of being controlled and thrown about by every thought and emotion to becoming the calm, gentle, and unwavering observer of our own inner sky. If there is one truth to carry forth from our time together, let it be this: peace is not the absence of storms on the outside, but the profound stillness of the ocean deep within you. It is not a final destination you must struggle to reach, but a way of walking the path, moment by moment. True peace is not something you find out there in the world, by acquiring more things or arranging your life perfectly. It is an intrinsic quality of your own awareness, a hidden spring that can be uncovered and nurtured, right here, right now, in the simple, humble miracle of a single breath. The path of letting go, which can seem so frightening, is not a path of loss. It is the path of true and ultimate freedom, the unburdening of all that was never truly yours to carry in the first place. And so, the journey forward is now yours. Know that you are the one who holds the key to your own inner peace. These teachings are not meant to be rigid doctrines to be believed, but practical, compassionate tools to be used. You have the inherent ability to change your relationship with your own thoughts and feelings. You have the power to stop being a victim of your past and a slave to your future. You have the capacity to find a stable, unshakable refuge within the sanctuary of your own presence. You do not need to wait for a perfect moment. You do not need to change who you are. All you need to do is begin. Start with just one breath. Feel the air enter your body and feel it leave. For just that one moment, you have come home. And one breath is all it takes to begin the most important journey you will ever take. The journey back to yourself.